Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. I hope you guys are doing all right this morning. Okay, this looks a little weird. It's cup. That's all it is. It's nothing weird. I hope you guys are doing all right. Best damn morning show that you can find on news, politics, domestic, and international. And I am your esteemed, humble host covering these items. I hope you guys, wherever you are safe, sound, under the sound of this voice. You guys could be anywhere, and you just so happen to find yourself here. And more people are finding themselves here. And I appreciate all of you for coming here, listening to, as I pointed out, this esteemed host. A lot of interesting news. And I want to give a shout out to the chat because we have right with the people here already. Zen Soulful Being, Artie, Deborah Wilson, J, Diane, Mama Thomas, Jin Ho Choi, all of you, Cypher Agent. Shout out to all of you. And thank you for joining me. I want to start here. There's a lot of news, but I want to start on the Russian front. This is Witkoff, the realist, as he's deemed, going to Russia, having a conversation with Vladimir Putin, trying to get Donald Trump's quote-unquote peace deal over the table with Russia. Now, Trump cannot even get his own proxy to accept the peace deal, but he is trying to get Putin to accept a peace deal. They've added in all sorts of economic inducements and all of these other things, but at the end of the day, Russia has told him niet. No. And not just told him no, making a very basic point. Losers don't get to dictate terms. Now, for all of this gyration and all of this movement that Donald Trump is effectively making, he seems to not grasp that they lost in Ukraine, despite the fact that he would acknowledge, A, it's proxy war, and B, Russia is about to take all of it. So it is weird that you are effectively offering terms of your own when you admit, at least implicitly, that you and all of those other NATO countries have lost. It is a fascinating thing. Delusion is a wonderful place. And yet that seems to be the place that Donald Trump and his team exist in. Hey, Putin, will you accept the U.S. running Zaporozhye nuclear power plant that is in Russian territory under Russian law that they took through blood, sweat, and money? Of course, the answer is going to be no. We are not going to acknowledge the territories that you guys have taken, but we will do so de jure. We would, acknowledge the fact that you've taken them. Well, we don't need you to acknowledge the fact that we've taken them. It's a flat fact reality. We've taken them. Meaning the things that Trump is offering is ludicrous. And the notion that Russia would accept a frozen conflict under these terms are ludicrous. And yet, Witkoff is apparently going back to Russia. And once again, Trump cannot even get his own proxy to accept these terms. How do you expect the victors to accept those terms? Zelensky has been running around begging, pleading for a ceasefire, and he's doing so for obvious reasons. They're getting crushed on the front lines. You have 70,000 or more Ukrainian soldiers, the cream of the crop, that were either killed or, for that matter, damaged badly and taken out of the conflict, that he wasted on a propaganda exercise that I would like to point out, planned by the Brits, and that many in the West thought was a fantastic idea. Okay, it's not a fantastic idea considering you got all those people killed for no good reason. They're losing territories left and right. You can go and check it. They don't necessarily put it in Western media, but if you look at more than Western media, you can see one hamlet, one village, one area being taken one after the next. You can see that Ukraine is losing manpower. You can see that they're running out of weapons. You can see all of these things. And these are not issues that are taking place on the Russian side. And even if you look at the benefactors in Europe, again, delusion is a wonderful place. It's kind of like Rick James. Cocaine is a hell of a drug. Delusion is a hell of a drug. And yet, they still keep plugging away. One of the reporting, or some of the reporting that came out, is that the European leaders are freaked out, even Ukraine, that Trump is going to say, screw it. I can't get anybody to accept my terms. I'm leaving. And they're thinking that this is going to take place within 2 weeks. From their mouth to God's ears, from my point of view. We have inflamed, persisted with, directed a war against the Russian government. When the Russian government effectively won that war, a U.S. president cannot eat crow and accept that fact that they lost. And so you get all of these gyrations about a peace deal that under no circumstances would have ever been accepted. And again, I keep pointing out, it's not even accepted by the U.S. proxy. Zelensky is not acknowledging Crimea. Zelensky is not acknowledging those territories. And from the Ukrainian side, from their point of view, even if we accept a ceasefire, it is temporary, which from the Russian point of view is unacceptable. If you go into the terms that Vladimir Putin effectively gave to Witkoff, Trump, and anybody else who wanted to listen to it, he pointed out unconditional surrender is effectively what he's calling for. And what I mean by that is, if you are saying that you need to acknowledge that these territories are part of Russia, acknowledgement is different than de jure. Those are different things. And the question becomes, how do you get a Ukrainian government to acknowledge that the territories, Zaporozhye, Kherson, Donetsk, Lugansk, Crimea, how do you get them to acknowledge that these territories are within the context of the Russian government if it is not complete surrender? Meaning you require a government that would sign on a dotted line, these are yours, period. Rando person signs representing the Ukrainian government. That's what you require. And in order to get that, that's not a negotiated settlement with Zelensky. That's not Trump's peace plan. That's not something that the European leaders would accept or want. That is a surrender, which is the reason why I make this argument that what Putin, Lavrov, Moscow, the Russian government is effectively offering is a surrender document. Now, there may be leeway in that document. If no NATO expansion, because again, the issue is not just Ukraine. As I keep pointing out, Ukraine is a symbol for something larger. NATO expansion is the issue. It is the main issue. It is the thematic issue. And unless you're going to really deal with that in real terms, you're not really dealing with anything. Hence, no NATO and Ukraine being one of the main sticking points. Now, is it possible that if the deal is sweet enough coming from Europe and the United States and believable enough that Putin would say, take a political stance, a political take, use a little bit of rhetoric to maybe have the lines where they are and make some kind of argument as for why that's okay? Who knows? Maybe. But that is not the document that Donald Trump released, nor is that the document that Putin is looking at coming out of the United States, nor is that the rhetoric coming out of Europe, who delusionally wants to continue the war. What's interesting is a paper, the news has been reporting that the Brits, even if they wanted to, meaning even if everything in them wanted to, even if their life depended on it, wanted to put troops in Ukraine, they wouldn't be able to muster 20,000 troops to do so. And yet, these are the people that are still agitating for conflict. Delusion is a hell of a place. Right here. This came out, and there's an article backing it, and I have a link to the article backing it, but I'll just show this. The Times, right here, Europe would struggle to put 25,000 troops on the ground in Ukraine. Not just Britain, Europe. All of Europe. Do they know how many people died in Kursk just over the course of the last several months? That's about 1 month of combat. Meaning you would be feeding Europeans into a wood chipper. And for what? For what? Europe has ran on a stab in the back myth that I call it jingoism, and has constructed a propagandistic narrative that in no way is associated with reality. And they have pushed this using and working with Joe Biden to come up with this farcical idea in order to get their populations to send more and more money as their standard of living went lower and lower and lower. For all of this talk about this European garden, it doesn't look that much like a garden now. You are effectively being deindustrialized. And many of those companies are coming to America because they can't afford the energy in Europe. Because what Europe didn't fully realize is that that garden fully depended upon cheap energy that it was getting from Russia. And the moment that the United States conned you to cut you off from that, that garden was no more a garden. It was a jungle. It is very weird to me that the European populations are okay with this. And I suspect part of the reason that there's a trend to the right is because many of the right-wing parties are effectively asking, why are we doing this? They may be loony in many respects, but that looniness is different than, why are we doing this? Why are we giving up cheap energy? Why are we allowing ourselves to be deindustrialized? Why are we allowing ourselves to send Europeans off to get themselves killed in a war that really shouldn't have started in the first place? Why are we doing this? Now, Trump, who doesn't, I don't believe for a moment that Donald Trump fully gets the Russian position on this, that from their take, it is existential. Arno was on the show yesterday, and Arno said something that touched me because it hit me in a way that I guess I didn't fully grasp until you heard a Russian say it and explain it in those terms. And that video should have more views. He pointed out that they are trampling upon something sacred. And what he means by that is the great patriotic war that they're about to celebrate in Moscow on Victory Day. What is it, May 5th? Where, is it May 5th or May 9th? I forget which day. Either way, they're about to celebrate it. Many world leaders are going to that. The world, the US, France, the UK, China, all of these forces came together in order to beat back the devil himself. Nazis, ran by a genocidal madman, Hitler, who wanted to depopulate Moscow, who wanted to take over and did take over all of Europe. If it wasn't for the Soviet Union, all of those people who are talking now in Europe will be speaking German. I would argue, including the Brits. If instead of him turning to the Soviet Union, he would have turned to the UK and put all of his force into taking the UK, he would have done it. I don't care about Winston Churchill screaming about we'll be fighting with shovels. You would have lost with those shovels, just like everybody else in Europe lost with the weapons that they had at their disposal. It's like 80 to 90% of the people, of the Nazis that died in the Soviet Union. They took the brunt of that war machine. The world came together and said, never again, hence the Nuremberg trials. Europe has been willing to feed that beast once again in order to wage war against Russia. Again, a war that never needed to take place. When you have all of these forces in Ukraine, the CIA and everything else, I'm not going to rehash because I've gone over the history of this. Mark has gone over the history of this. Anybody who's on this channel at this point knows the history of how this stuff started. But this farcical idea that Putin was just chomping at the bit to take over all of Ukraine and then go rummaging through Europe is nonsense. The notion that 150,000 troops were going to take over all of Europe when it couldn't even pacify and take over all of Ukraine is a logical fallacy. It's nonsense. That is what they ran with. And they've milked that cow in order to get money and money and money from populations that are already not necessarily in the best of economic shape. I'm just pointing out, it never needed to take place. They lost, and the loser does not get to dictate terms. Whether Donald Trump fully understands the history of how this started, whether he fully understands how Russia sees this as existential, whether he fully gets that the Russian public, that at one point might have been divided on the issue of Putin, is behind him 80% or more in regards to beating back the beast that the West has unleashed. Whether he fully gets it or not, he will fully get it in the sense that they are telling him and completely rejecting this nonsense proposal that he is putting out. Negotiations is what you would need to do. And you would need to be long, painstaking, and you would need to nail down various things that would need to be legally binding. Now, if Trump's ADD doesn't allow him to do that, then this is a fool's errand. Complete fool's errand. I want to put a hard stop on this, and I want to transition to something else. Trump has not been able to get his proxy, Zelensky, on board. Now, Rubio has come out and said this was a proxy war. Thank you for acknowledging reality. Something that we've been saying for God knows how long, and that was completely obvious. Le Figaro, it was a French journal, 3 years ago pointed out that when he went to Ukraine, what he saw was Americans on the ground directing events. 3 years later, and $1 short, you get the New York Times pointing out, hey, come to find out that America was directing the events on the ground for the Ukrainian military. Who knew? Who knew? Your humble journalist or your humble reporter here knew. And I can't necessarily call myself a reporter, but I would say your humble podcaster knew. Or at the very least at the time, your humble radio host knew. It was obvious, which is my issue with the U.S. media. There's a level of propaganda that runs through it. This American exceptionalism creates this contact lens that's jaundice, that is foggy in the way that it looks at the world and the way it looks at reality. If you're sitting on the moon looking at events and you're just being fair, we had the Cuban Missile Crisis. We would not tolerate. I'm sorry, whole different story. Point that I'm getting at is if Trump cannot even get his proxy on board, how do you expect to get a foreign government that is actually winning the conflict on board? The answer is you don't. You don't. Now, I don't know if this deal that Trump came up with was meant to fail, whether it was meant to be a dead letter to allow Trump to say, all right, I did everything I could. These are horrible people. They're unreasonable. And so I'm now walking. But the fact that Trump is acknowledging Ukraine will collapse, the military will fall at some point, Putin will take the country, is a hell of an acknowledgement and a hell of an admission that you've lost the war, especially if you're saying it's a proxy. Zelensky is not willing to accept that. Now, I would say there are a few reasons he's not willing to accept it. One of which is he's terrified for his life. He's terrified for his life. Zelensky's life has been threatened by his own military. And this was something that was known for a while. I mean, keep in mind, for all the talk, there are no Nazis in Ukraine. Okay, whatever you want to call them, Banderites, far-right, whack jobs, Russian haters, whatever you want to call them. There are some hardcore lunatics that are ensconced in the Ukrainian military and the political structure. There is no issue with assassinations, no issues with murders, no issues with dragging people and throwing them and press ganging them into a conflict the way they'll get killed within a few days. And what Zelensky knows is if he signs a piece of paper saying, I know I'm legitimate, but I surrender, he better run to France. As soon as he signs it, he better run to France. Just right out Ukraine. Don't even get in the car. Just run. Just keep running. Him and his beautiful wife run as fast and as far as you possibly can. Because if you go to bed that night in Kiev, you will not wake up alive. Just pointing it out. Don't take my word for it. So right here, this is Ukrainian commander. Now this is funny to me, right? It's funny to me for a few counts. For one, the notion that they have 1 million men backing them is nonsense. I would be shocked if you have 1 million men still in your military. Whatever. Listen to this conversation. By the way, this is taking place on TV. This is not behind the scenes. This is not a leak. It's like a secret video. Listen to what is said here. Or watch what is said here. They're speaking in Ukrainian, but listen what's said here.
Є другий пост, друга цитата командира 414-ї окремої бригади Роберта Мадяра, який сказав ось що. До Нового року війна не закінчиться. Можна його цитату, якщо є? До Нового року війна не закінчиться, але зміниться її формат. Ми закріпимо той переломний момент, який зараз відбувається. Якщо влада розмовлятиме з російськими чортами не в інтересах українського народу, ця влада отримує від нас по куполу, бо нас 1 мільйон вернеться з війни, а ми тут часу не гаяли. І якщо нам щось не подобатиметься з точки зору цілісності країни, неприємності чекатимуть будь-кого. Є
Zelensky decides to work with the Russian freaks. The commander, who gave his name, by the way, he wasn't hiding the ball. He gave his name. Let me find the name. Right here. 414th Separate Brigade, Robert Madar, whatever that is. We will come back and raise hell. We will come back and raise hell. We will march on Kiev for all intents and purposes. Now, this is effectively what Zelensky is up against. If you remember when Boris Johnson made the point about the Minsk agreement saying Zelensky couldn't sign that deal, why couldn't he sign that deal? Because he knew his life was in prize if he did. They still think they're going to have a turning point, that they're going to somehow consolidate, turn it around, and beat back the Russian bear. That is what they think. I will point out, delusion is a hell of a place. Oh, it's a hell of a place. Oh, it's a beautiful place. Everything is beautiful in delusions. In their mind, we're going to consolidate. We're going to beat back the Russian bear. And if Zelensky signs a deal, that will be his ass. We will march. We will come back 1 million men strong. That's what he's up against. Don't just take my word for it on that. There's more on this front. So right here, here's another one. This one, I forget, I don't know the publication. Again, they're not hiding the ball, they're putting their names up. Zelensky put forward ultimatum to Zelensky and gave him 10 days. When did this come out? This was 2019. Meaning Zelensky has been threatened the entire way through. You're threatening the new president of Ukraine, Zelensky. And if you remember, when Zelensky went to the battlefield and said, hey, I need you to pull your forces back, talking to one of the Azov teams or brigades. And the guy dressed them down. We don't have to listen to you. And say, here's a letter from all of these people about what they think about you. And Zelensky say, I'm not some asshole, I'm your president, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He knows. He knows. He knows that if he signs on a dotted line, if he accepts a ceasefire, if he accepts Crimea, if he accepts any of those territories, that is his ass. Which I would wager to you is part and parcel to the reason that Trump can't get Zelensky on board. I would wager another reason is the moment that any agreement is signed, he's out of power. He's out of power. He loses his political standing. Like there are pressures on him that may not necessarily be the most visible in the world that allows him to live, or that at the very least incentivizes him to live in that delusion. Because truth be told, regardless of what Zelensky does, there will come a point where the Ukrainian military breaks. Now, in order for denazification, you're talking about removing root and branch, all of these elements within the context of the Kiev government, Zelensky included, his team included, and I would imagine those military units that are part of these kind of Nazi brigades. Hence, demilitarization of Ukraine, one of the things that Russia has put forward in their surrender terms. It's complicated. You also have the Europeans who keeps filling Zelensky's head up with all of these ideas of the things that they can do and help him with, when, again, the reality of it is, as I pointed out here, don't take my word for it, take the Times' word for it. If they wanted to, could not put 25,000 people on the battlefield in Ukraine if they wanted to. Isn't that amazing? And yet, they keep plugging along. In one case, you have a U.S. president that can't acknowledge the fact that he failed, or at the very least the U.S. failed, can't eat crow, despite the fact that he keeps calling it Joe Biden's war. Fair enough. If it's Joe Biden's war, why don't you call it a day like Steve Bannon and walk the F away? Should have did that when he first got in. In another case, you have a president who's terrified for his life, that believes, and rightly so, that if he signs over any particular document or recognizes any of those territories, something, by the way, that whether you recognize them or not, the Russian military keeps going westward, inexorably westward. They keep moving. Every syllable out of my mouth is a dead Ukrainian or Ukrainian that is going to be mangled for life. And yet, these fools still play around with the lives of his own citizens. The majority of Ukraine has said they wanted to stop the war, even if it means territorial concessions. And yet, Zelensky keeps going. The Europeans, just like the Americans, in no way care about Ukrainian lives. You can hear it out of American politicians when they say, this is a great investment. We're putting in money. They're putting in their lives. What is the issue? Why are Americans freaked out about this? It's not us fighting. And I would wager to you that the Brits and the French think something very similar. It's not us doing the fighting. We are just putting the money in. Hell, we couldn't do the fighting if we wanted to because we couldn't even field 25,000 people on the battlefield. And if we did, they would be eaten over the course of a week. This is where we are. This is the context to what is taking place in regards to these negotiations and the other people who are fundamentally delusional in the way that they're looking at. Keep it going. Keep it going. There may be one other reason. How do you explain to your populations that you lost? How do you do that? How do you explain this notion that the burdens that they were able to take on, that they had to take on because of the leaders, that, by the way, are not popular? Think of the things that they had to do in Europe in order to maintain some level of control. They had to get rid of Carlin Gogetscu in Romania, where they had to literally cancel the elections. Look at all the hoops they jumped through to ensure that Le Pen's party didn't take it when Le Pen's party should have effectively taken it because they were the main party or the leading party. Look at what is taking place with Le Pen, where they effectively say, hey, we're hitting you with a charge. You don't have to go to jail, but you can't run in an election for the next 7 years. Okay, that's kind of weird, right? And think of the guy who came on TV saying, we have the same process for Germany if Germany's AfD takes power and wants to effectively pull Germany out of supporting this war. They have taken Herculean efforts, bastardizing their own, whatever they call democracy, more of a bureaucracy, in order to maintain this struggle, a struggle, by the way, that they've lost and continue to lose. It is wild. It is unfortunate. This notion of life apparently doesn't necessarily matter. I think I care more about Ukrainians than any of these whack jobs and the way that they talk about Ukraine, or for that matter, the way they keep the war going, despite the fact that it's clear as day that Ukraine is lost. And maybe what needs to happen is there's a sweet point where Russia gets to, and they say, okay, fair enough. Maybe it's that. I don't know what that sweet point is. Maybe you get to the thing where they say, let's let Russia take it all. Let's drain their resources. Let's build up our own militaries. And then we fight a war. Maybe it's that. Would the U.S. be against that? Who knows? Depends on who the president is, right? Trump is going to be gone in 3 or 4 years. If it takes Russia 2 years in order to take all of Ukraine, what does Europe look like in those 2 years? All of these things are up in the air. There's some outcomes that are terrifying. There's some outcomes that are less so. The European governments may collapse. You may get a situation where, the Macron Renaissance Party, who's already greatly disliked, Macron is going to be out in 2027. There's going to be somebody else who goes in. It may be Le Pen's party that takes it at that year. Who knows what happens in Germany? The German government, especially on the merits, if he continues in the way that he's going, he may collapse. You may get something like the AfD that takes over. Oh my God, in Germany. And again, what happens if they pull out of this fool's errand? Okay, these are the two main proponents that are pushing this war forward. The Brits are pathetic and technically, at the very least, not part of the European Union or the European Union, even though they're part of NATO. My point is, the next few years are going to be interesting. To say we live in interesting times is an understatement. This is the context of the events, and this is where these events can go. If Trump walks, Europe can't carry the burden. If Trump walks but continues to, aid in the conflict, okay, that's interesting, right? That bastardizes what he effectively said on the campaign trail, that repudiates what he's been saying, I'm going to walk, I'm going to walk, I'm going to walk. It's unclear how this turns out in real terms. I have no belief that they're going to sign a deal. I have no belief that Ukraine will accept the deal. Even if they say they may, it may be purely for political purposes. Because you have to understand, it would make all the sense in the world for Zelensky to just say, yes, I accept, whether he does or not, knowing full well that under the Russian Constitution itself, that Putin can't accept the deal that Trump put forward. Meaning, politically, it would make sense for him to say, the onus is on you. And I have to ask, why can't he do that? Maybe he can't. Maybe he can't. Maybe he knows his life is on the line, is at stake if he does. It is fascinating. And I didn't mean to take this long to delve into it, but there are times I like to give context about where we are and what is taking place. Look, I've worked at the Russian radio station for 5 years before doing this. Well, not before. I was doing my show before that. I had a point of view before that. I learned a hell of a lot being on that station, not just about media and about news and about interviews and those type of things, but the way a point of view is shaped in various countries. Because when you're perched at the edge of the world like that, you're looking at the world, not just individual country. And you could see how media shapes a narrative in the very specific countries through their own lens and their own framework. The US may call themselves independent media. There's nothing further from the truth. And so I try to give kind of a larger context of what is happening, why it's happening, potential outcomes to the things that are happening. It is fascinating. When I say we live in interesting times, I really do mean we live in interesting times. And the next 5 years, I would argue is unpredictable. I would say that, but who knows? A person who's more adept than myself, with larger testicles than myself, may be willing to make those predictions. I am not. One of the other stories that we're going to hit today that I'm actually eager to hit, even though I don't know if the audience is going to care that much about it. 2 nuclear powers are coming at odds, Pakistan and India. Now, I've had the Pakistani journalist come on to discuss from his point of view of what is taking place in regards to what happened in Kashmir. But this has started to escalate big time. And Pakistan is effectively saying an attack is imminent within 24 to 34 hours, and that they will respond to any level of aggression coming out of India. There are rumors that the United States, that J.D. Vance being there the day before is not coincidental. Again, that's interesting, right? I don't know the relevance, but there's rumors about it. There's also talk that China is working behind the scenes in order to prevent these two from going at it, because none of this is to the benefit of China or the surrounding regions. I suspect that's probably true. They've been statesmen over the course of the last several years. Now, what is true is Modi has granted operational authority to his military to kick some ass. According to Indian government sources, Prime Minister Modi has granted Indian armed forces full operational freedom to decide mode, target, and timing of their response to the Pahalgam attack. It's terrifying. 2 nuclear powers. We'll have a conversation with Shobhan. Shobhan will give his take on what it means, at the very least, probably the Indian perspective of the way they see it, the consequences of any kind of attack, how far they believe that's going to escalate. Who knows? One more story. What time is it? We have a little bit of time. Donald Trump has done an interview with CBS News, ABC News. I know that Trump likes to go with this idea that I'm available, Joe Biden wasn't. So look at how many interviews I've done. Look at how often I talk to the press. But if you go and talk to the press, you just lie. Like, the level of mendacity that comes out of Trump is astonishing. It is Herculean in scale, the bullshit that he shuffles out. And some of these lies, I used to say my dad was a habitual liar because he was. Trump beats him 1,000 times over. And some of the stuff is just easily proven to be false. And it doesn't matter. He would say it with a straight face and then feel some kind of way when you point out, Mr. President, you're lying. You're just full of shit right now. How dare you say I'm full of shit, sir? I'm the president of the United States. Doesn't mean you're not full of shit, sir. I want to play one or two of these clips before my guest comes on. And then he gets mad when he gets fact-checked. That's the wild part, right? So I'm going to play this one first. If you remember, Abrego Garcia, this gentleman from Maryland, was deported despite the fact that the court pointed out that he was not supposed to be deported. I want to nail that down. The court was very clear. He was not supposed to be deported. The government, U.S. government, admits it was a mistake to deport him. It was a mistake. And yet Trump has kept saying, we can't get him back. We can't get him back. We don't have the ability to get him back. He's a terrorist. He's from MS-13. And it's like, okay, you're making that up, right? You don't have anything to back that up with. And that's something that should be litigated in courts through due process, which you, sir, are not the courts. Not to mention Supreme Court, 9-0. Bring him back. Bring him back. All right. For the longest time, Donald Trump has been saying, well, we can't bring him back. We can't bring him back. He gets into a back and forth with the interviewer on this very specific issue. Listen to this back and forth, where Trump at a certain point just starts deriding the interviewer when he realizes that he's effectively busted in a lie.
He did not have the letter MS-13.
It says MS-13.
That was Photoshop. So let me
That
just.
was Photoshop, Terry. You can't do that. Hey, they're giving you the big break of a lifetime. You know, you're doing the interview. I picked you because, frankly, I never heard of you, but that's okay. But I picked you, Terry, but you're not being very nice. He had MS-13 tattooed.
We'll agree to disagree. I want to move on to something else.
Terry.
Don't agree to disagree. Trump is lying through his teeth. He's wrong. He's wrong. Somebody photoshopped something, and Donald Trump believes it's reality. He is wrong. The interviewer is right. And to make this point even worse, this came out where Donald Trump finally admitted that, well, yeah, I'm the president. If I need to bring it back, I can do so.
You could get him back. There's a phone on this desk.
I could.
You could pick it up, and with all the power of the presidency, you could call up the president of El Salvador and say, send him back right now.
And if he were the gentleman that you say he is, I would do that.
But the court has
he's
ordered
not.
you to facilitate that.
I'm not the one making this decision. We have lawyers that don't
president.
want to do this legally.
Trump finally admits, yeah, if I wanted to bring it back, I could do so. And if he was the gentleman that you said he was, dude, it's not about him being a gentleman. We have a court system for a reason. If a guy goes out, runs his car into 10 people, everybody sees him, meaning 100 people around, watch him do it. 20 video cameras, watch him do it, and can pinpoint the exact individual that did it. That guy still goes to court. That guy still gets a lawyer. And that guy still gets his day in court to make his case. That's called being an American. That is a good thing. You should want that. You may hate the guy for doing it. But at some point, you may want your day in court to protect your rights. Also, everybody gets their day in court, all things being equal. And for whatever particular reason, Donald Trump doesn't quite get this. And so when the court says, bring him back, and the president is like, yeah, I'm not doing that. That's a big deal. That's called a constitutional crisis. The president is blowing off the courts and is using his own determination of, well, the guy's a terrorist, so I kicked him out of the country and put him into a country they didn't belong in. That is outrageous. I understand that MAGA is okay with that. MAGA wasn't okay with that when their ass was being taken to court on January 6th. And when they were being stuck in a jail cell for like 2 years for January 6th, when the FBI would get calls saying, hey, I saw my grandma at January 6th in DC, and the FBI would knock on the door and take grandma away. They didn't feel that way when that was taking place. They wanted their day in courts. They wanted their lawyers to be called. They wanted to be able to adjudicate their case. They wanted all of that stuff. But now, in this case, send them away. I would tell you that my sympathies for the people on January 6th has diminished significantly, where I've gotten to the point where I don't care. If you are going to act this way in regards to somebody else, then you can't complain when you're coming the other way. And for all of this talk about Donald Trump's day in court and all of the prosecutions against Donald Trump and everything else, I agree that the court case that was taking place in New York was nonsense. Complete nonsense. And I guess I'm pointing out, I've been consistent on that front, because whether it was the way the people in January 6th were treated, whether it was the way Donald Trump was treated in the legal sense, if it was bogus, I would call it bogus. If it was legit, I would call it legit. And I'm saying that's being an American. There's something inherently American about taking a position like that of, we have laws in this country. We have laws in this country for a reason. We used to have a king. The king used to throw people in jail when they wanted to. And when America created this thing, we were like, we don't like the fact that the king could do that. We want due process. We want First Amendment. We want, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the notion that he blows it away after bitching and moaning about what was taking place for the people who were in MAGA that was trying to overthrow the US government in that riot is pretty outrageous. I'm not shocked by the hypocrisy. For me, I assume that this stuff is always issues of power, not issues of principle. But there is something to be said about principle that you would want people to have in order to have a functional government. That is unfortunate. That is deeply unfortunate. And it's deeply, even more so, the fact that his supporters are okay with it. Even more so. I want to hit this with Ted when Ted comes on, but that is deeply unfortunate. Trump, in the interview, continues to lie and lie and lie and lie. He does so brazenly, without a shadow of guilt, without a shadow of, hey, most people, when they lie, there's something in them that recognizes the fact that they're lying. Trump, not so much. The reason I was late is because I was looking for a specific video or specific image for this very specific clip. Trump is making the argument, because look, the last 100 days have been some of the worst 100 days of any president that we've ever had. I defy you to name one that was worse. Trump has been incompetent on the issue of foreign policy. He has no wins. He's been incompetent on the issue of the economy. He has no wins. He's been incompetent on the issue of immigration. You can call what he's been doing wins. I don't. Obama deported more people than Trump, and I would wager to you that at the end of Donald Trump's term, both terms, Obama would have still deported more people than Trump. Just because he is sending people to a foreign country does not mean that he's doing good things on the issue of immigration. And there's a reason that the American public who agreed with him initially on the economy, immigration, no longer does so. There's a reason his approval rating is cratering day after day after day, because they can see how incompetent he actually is on all of these issues and how all of this stuff is just chaos that he himself has created. Even if I agree that there are things that Trump defined as problematic that are true, how he goes about it is absurd and makes it worse. And I just know what I mean. All right, so this is his take on tourism. This is, by the way, demonstrative false. Easy to prove that it's false. And it doesn't stop him one iota from saying what he's about to say.
And Canadians, many of them, are really angry, furious about your talk about we're going to take over Canada's going to become the 51st state. And it kind of is of a piece. A lot of travel is down into the United States from around the world. It feels like there's been reputational
The country's
damage.
doing great.
Well,
Prices are down.
not the tourism.
Gasoline's down. Energy's down. Tourism is going to be way up. Wait till you see the numbers. The tourism is way up.
Not now.
Now, Canada, tourism's doing very well. We're doing very well. We're doing very well. Wait till you see the real numbers come out in 6 months from now. Wait till you see the numbers.
But do you
They're gonna
think,
be
I'm going
very
to ask you,
good.
if I may, do you think that
The reporter pointed out tourism is not way up in the way that the real numbers, whatever the hell that is. For one, let's talk about Canada for a bit. Justin Trudeau took a dump in the prime minister seat in Canada. So much so that it was assumed that, short of an act of God, that a conservative was going to win the seat. And yet, liberal Mike Carney, I think it's his name, Mark Carney, ends up taking the Canadian prime ministership purely because of Donald Trump. There are clips of people who were on the street in Canada when asked about why they voted in the way that they voted. And it boiled down to Donald Trump, meaning Donald Trump got a liberal elected in Canada when it was a foregone conclusion that a conservative was going to win that seat because of how bad Justin Trudeau wrecked that country. That is astonishing. All this talk about the 51st state, all of this talk about, you should come over to us. We've been supporting you, et cetera, et cetera. We're going to pass tariffs. All of these things directly affected Canada. Carney comes out, anti-Trump, makes the speech that the United States can no longer be trusted. And this kind of relationship between the United States and Canada is no more right here. This woman was asked, hey,
Trump.
Why did you vote the way you did? Another country, by the way. Why did you vote the way you did? You please tell us.
I think who I voted for would be the best to take care of Trump, because Trump is, I'm sorry to say, an ass, and he shouldn't even be president of the United States. But because he is, we need a strong person so that we could stand strong.
Trump is, I'm sorry to say, an asshole. I like it when old people curse. It's the funniest thing in the world to me, especially Canadians who are supposed to be very polite, very kind, very, a muted version of America. And she's on air. She has a mic interface. Why did you vote, Miss Canadian old lady, the way that you voted? Because Donald Trump is an asshole. That's why I voted the way that I voted. So when you go to tourism numbers, just to make the point very clear, don't take my word for it, take Financial Times, who looked at the tourism numbers and were shocked about what they saw. This is the numbers. Toilet, 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 and toilet. Those aren't positive numbers. That's not doing fantastic. And look at what it was in 2024. And look at what it is now. Negative 20%. Denmark, negative, 32%. Germany, negative 30%. Iceland, who was close, by the way, they're like a 3-hour flight, negative 31%. Spain, negative 23, 24%, 26% maybe. Norway, again, close, negative 26%. Sweden, negative 25%. And the UK, our closest partner, the people who created us, negative 25%. Demonstratively false. That's what I mean. Like, he lies as easily as he breathes in a way that is obviously wrong. And in no way does it stop him from doing so. Let's keep going. What time is it? Okay, we have one more. So this one is fantastic. This one is fantastic. He is, with a straight face, trying to argue tariffs won't raise prices. Tariffs won't raise prices at all. Now, this is the same one who's been trying to make this argument that tariffs are going to somehow pay for the middle class. Anybody making under 200K, it may take a while, but tariffs are going to pay for our middle class. No, they're not. No, they're not. And I'm going to make this point clear in a few points. So this is Trump making this case. Again, he's lying through his teeth. Tariffs are taxes. That's what they are. We pay tariffs.
What's happened?
Companies are not taking them on for themselves. We pay those tariffs.
Don't your tariffs cut against that promise you made to bring prices down?
No, because I had massive tariffs on China, if you remember, in my first term, and we had essentially no inflation, like around 1% inflation, which is like a perfect number. And then when Biden took over, it went through the roof. It went to probably the worst inflation we've ever had. I mean, we had an inflation nightmare. Now, if you look at what's happening now, we're only there for 100 days, as you say. And in 100 days, we took over. We had bad inflation for 4 years, for 2 years of, especially 2 years of his administration. I would say record-setting like we've never seen. They say 48 years, the worst in 48 years. I say it was much worse than that.
Yeah.
Right. So now if you look at what's happened, Energy is down. Gasoline hit $1.98 in a few states during the last couple of days. It was $3.50 and $4 and $4.50.
Now, to be fair to Trump, he's right about inflation under Biden. He is perfectly right. When Joe Biden kept lying, saying it's transient, Jen Psaki comes out and says, our values are not without cost, effectively saying the sanctions that we're passing on Russia that increases cost here in the United States, that we have to accept that cost because that is the price of freedom and that is the price of fighting the Russians. He is perfectly right. He is lying through his teeth about the notion that tariffs are not taxes. And to make that point clear, if Donald Trump was right, meaning if what he's saying here is true, this reaction that took place yesterday at the press corps doesn't take place because he wouldn't have to worry about prices from Amazon going through the roof and going sky high. Let's look at the freak out that happens in the press room after they're asked about Amazon attaching the additional cost to the price of items.
It was reported this morning that Amazon will soon display a little number next to the price of each product that shows how much the Trump tariffs are adding to the cost of each product. So isn't that a perfect crystal clear demonstration that it's the American consumer and not China who is going to have to pay for these policies?
I will take this since I just got off the phone with the president about Amazon's announcement. This is a hostile and political act by Amazon. Why didn't Amazon do this when the Biden administration hiked inflation to the highest level in 40 years?
This is a hostile and political act by Amazon to display how much more the product costs because of Donald Trump. A hostile political act. That's what they call it. Is that when Joe Biden increased price, inflation. Okay, what does that have to do with you? And not just what does that have to do with you? How is Amazon wrong for pointing out Trump did this? It's not us. That $10 extra, that's from Trump. That $20 extra, that's from Trump. Trump, Shobhan, give me 1 second. I'm coming to you right in a moment. Trump apparently put pressure on Jeff Bezos to get him to not do it. Now, Bezos ultimately said, well, I was never going to plan to do it. Who knows whether Jeff Bezos was going to ultimately do it or not? Trump gets on the phone to call Jeff Bezos to say, hey, Bezos, please, bro, don't make me look bad.
Great. Jeff Bezos was very nice. He was terrific. He solved the problem very quickly. And he did the right thing. And he's a good guy.
My point is basic. If Trump is right and tariffs are not taxes, meaning they weren't going to raise the price of items and goods and products, then why did they have that level of a freak out when Bezos was going to put how much it was going to cost because of Donald Trump on an item? He's lying through his teeth, and he is indicting himself in his own lies with the behavior of his press corps and even himself in that call to Jeff Bezos. Just outrageous. I want to bring on my guests. I'm sorry to keep him waiting. We are joined with the man himself. I haven't seen him in such a long time. It is great to see him. Shobhan, Saxena, journalist. Shobhan, I'm not even sure what your bio is now. I have one for you, but maybe you might be better off giving it. As a Sao Paulo-based journalist, I can say that. Where are you working now, by the way?
Morning, Jamal, and morning to all your viewers. I'm based in Sao Paulo in Brazil, and I've been here since 2012, reporting mostly for Indian media. I worked with Times of India. I worked with the Hindu, two major newspapers of India, also the Wire, which is also a website of India. And right now, I'm a correspondent for DD India, which is the state channel of India. It's very big. Sorry.
Oh, you're fine.
It's early morning, and it's a very big channel. They have 25 satellite channels in 15 languages across India. So I'm reporting about Brazil and Latin America for this Indian channel.
Oh, fantastic, man. I'm so glad that you're back in the saddle. I missed you. I missed your reporting. You've always been really good at what you've been doing, and I deeply appreciate you joining me to have a conversation about this. So this came out. Pakistan is effectively saying that India is preparing an attack within the next 24, I believe they said 32 hours. And this also came out. According to Indian government sources, Prime Minister Modi has granted Indian Armed Forces full operational freedom to decide the mode, target, and timing and response of the Falgam attack. I've had a Pakistani journalist to give their take on events, what they believe took place, what they believe happened. What is coming out of Pakistan is skepticism that this was indeed a Pakistani terrorist group. Now, Pakistan would admit that they have supported terrorist groups in the past. I mean, there have been interviews with people admitting to such. They would say that basically, hey, we did it for the West. Fair enough. India is effectively saying, look, you've given money to some of these groups. And in giving money to some of these groups, you are on some level culpable for what these groups do, this particular group in particular. Pakistan would say it is a bit weird for a group to be able to travel 100 kilometers to commit an attack like that, in which case they've said this seems like a false flag for the very purpose of creating a conflict between Pakistan and India. So both sides are sticking out their takes on this. Explain it to us. Explain it to my audience from, I guess you could say, the Indian perspective of what is going on and the Indian response to what is going on.
Okay, Jamal, let me talk briefly about the background of this whole story. What happened? I think this week, what happened? There's a place called Pahalgam in Jammu and Kashmir. It's a touristy place, very popular among Indian tourists. And there was a meadow, and thousands of Indians were enjoying. It's the weather in Jammu and Kashmir is cooler than the rest of the parts of India because it's getting hot in India. It's summer in it right now, and suddenly the 4 or 5 people turn up with guns, with Kalashnikovs, and they segregate people on the basis of religion. They ask their religion, and they put Hindus on one side and Muslims other side, and then they shoot 26 men who were all Hindus, 25 from India and 1 from Nepal. And they also give a message that this is a message to the government of India, what they're doing. So it was a cold-blooded massacre of innocent civilians in the heart of Jammu and Kashmir. A very, very sad and tragic event. Now, it is also, Jamal, a known fact that Pakistan has been not only supporting, but it's sponsoring, training, giving logistics and money support to the, what do you call them, militants or terrorists in Kashmir for decades, And it's very interesting that Pakistanis are singing a different tune now. They're saying, because earlier they used to openly admit that they support militants in Kashmir, and they would say, one man's terrorist is other man's freedom fighter, But right now, for the past 10 years or so, more than 10 years actually, there is so much terrorism in Pakistan itself, in Balochistan, and in the border areas with Afghanistan. Now they say, we are also victims of terrorism, so we don't support terrorism. But it's a known fact that terrorism has been an instrument of Pakistan's defense policy and Pakistan's foreign policy for a long time. So just to give an example, Khwaja Asif, who's the defense minister of Pakistan, he gave an interview to Sky News last week. He admitted openly that Pakistan has been doing the dirty work of the West in form of terrorism for decades. And he mentioned what happened in Afghanistan, Mujahideen, and all that. And interestingly, he repeated the same claim in an interview with RT Russia Today, I think a day later or 2 days later, that Pakistan has been doing the dirty work of the West for decades. But I think he was, again, not being completely honest because he didn't confess that Pakistan, of course, it's true. Pakistan was involved in the fight against the Mujahideen in Afghanistan against Soviet Union, and they sponsored, trained hundreds of groups, thousands of Mujahideens who came from all over the world, including Osama bin Laden. But it's also true that Pakistan has been using terrorism against India in Jammu and Kashmir, and earlier in Punjab in the 1980s and 90s, training groups, giving them all kinds of support. It's a known fact, and Pakistan has been condemned repeatedly at international level. Pakistan was blacklisted in the FATF list. Pakistan has suffered some consequences, but not completely. So now, because now there's a terrorism in Kashmir, now they say, oh, we are victims of Kashmir, we are victims of terrorism. So we are not involved in it. But I think most of the terrorist group in Pakistan, in Balochistan or Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, which borders Afghanistan, are homegrown terrorist organizations or militant organizations. There's an organization called BLA, Balochistan Liberation Army, active in Balochistan, and TTP, Tehreek-e-Tariq Pakistan, which is active in the areas on the bordering areas with Afghanistan. And they have been fighting the Pakistani army, actually, for a very, very long time. So I'm not sure to call them terrorist organizations because they are in fight against the Pakistani army and not so much against civilians. But what happens in Jammu and Kashmir, what has happened just now in Jammu and Kashmir, was an attack on civilians, on tourists, unarmed people, family men. They were just picked. They were from all over India, even from US. There was one Indian family from the US that picked up and just shot. So I think this is a cold-blooded massacre of innocent people. And Pakistan is trying to evade responsibility. Of course, they can't openly admit, but I'm glad now they are saying that. They have stopped saying that one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. So there's a change of tune in Pakistan, but Pakistan, cannot evade this responsibility, what they have done and they've been doing for years. I mean, I have also heard some, especially Najam Sethi, he's a prominent journalist in Pakistan, calling it a false flag operation. But he didn't give any evidence that it's a false flag operation. I mean, he used to be a credible journalist. Then he became a politician. He became a chief minister. Then he became administrator of the cricket board of Pakistan. He's just turned into a operator of the Pakistan's establishment. Very interesting, Jamal, knowing the history of Pakistan. I have studied Pakistan during my master's. I've been to Pakistan reporting elections from there. In all other countries, when you mention establishment, you mention the establishment, the corporates, the Wall Street, the political establishment. Pakistan is the only country in the world when you mention establishment, it means a military establishment. The army and the inter-services intelligence, the notorious intelligence agencies. I'm not saying this because I'm an Indian and we are suffering, or there's a position of the Indian government, but Pakistan's ISI is known for doing the dirty work, not only of the West, but of the Pakistan state for decades. It's a known fact. So that's my position on this issue.
So do you think, okay, but do you think Pakistan is involved in some way? Because look, everything you said, fantastic. And I do appreciate it. It's a good breakdown and a good rundown. And you're right about the Pakistani military being a force in Pakistan. Like that is the center. Like when the US is working with Pakistan, they work with the military, like in many respects. They're saying a false flag. Now, from your point of view, do you believe that the Pakistani government had something to do with it? Meaning, do you think that this was a terrorist group that was killing civilians, that was separate from the Pakistani government? Or do you think that the Pakistani government was somehow involved? Because as you point out, it's not that they do the dirty work of the West, they also do the dirty work of the Pakistani government, and that they are willing to use these terrorist groups for whatever particular ends. I'm trying to nail that down. The reason I'm trying to nail that down is because I'm trying to understand why, if that's true. Meaning, when I had my guest on last time, I was like, okay, why would they do that? Like when he said, we think it's a false flag, why would India do that? He said they wanted to create hostilities. Again, why would they do that? Why would they want to create hostilities with India in this way? And I guess I'm asking a similar question to India. Why would Pakistan want to create conflict with India just seemingly out of the blue in this way? If that's the case, if that's the belief that the Pakistani government, or let's say the Pakistani military, was somehow involved in murdering all of these civilians.
Okay. I mean, the only reason I wouldn't say that Pakistan is involved with, because I don't have any proof in my hand. I don't have any evidence. I'm not an investigator. I'm a journalist. I'm talking as an analyst here. But let me give you the broader picture of what's happening in Pakistan. So Pakistan has 4 provinces: Punjab, Sindh, Balochistan, and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. These 2 provinces, the Balochistan and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, has borders with Iran and Afghanistan. These 2 provinces has a very high degree of militancy. It's been going on for more than 15 years, actually. And the Balochistan Pakistan army is on the verge of losing control. Also in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. So here you have 2 big, Balochistan, by the way, is the biggest province in Pakistan. It has border with Iran, and it has border with Afghanistan. It also has a low intensity militancy inside Iran as well, because Balochistan was split by the British as usual between Pakistan and Iran, and they split the Pashto speaking Pathan areas between Afghanistan and Pakistan. This is also the part of the imperial legacy left behind by the British. So Pakistan army is fighting on two fronts, and they're actually losing. So they are on the verge of losing two provinces. Pakistan is on the verge of falling apart. They've never faced this situation before. Of course, in 1971, they fought a war with India, and they lost the eastern flank of Pakistan, which was called East Pakistan earlier, and it led to the emergence of an independent country called Bangladesh. And because they lost East Pakistan, and Bangladesh was born as a result of war with India. So Pakistan has never forgiven and forgotten that lesson, that they, from being two West Pakistan and East Pakistan, they got reduced to just Pakistan on the western flank of India. So now the biggest challenge for the Pakistani establishment, which is basically military and the ISI, how is to keep the two countries, how to keep these provinces, how to keep the country together, because you have a high level militancy. So just, I think, a few days before this attack in Pahalgam in Kashmir, the chief of the Pakistani army, General Munir, he gave a speech speaking to overseas Pakistanis who live mostly in the Western countries, in the US and UK and Europe, other parts. And he said very clearly that Kashmir is a jugular vein of Pakistan. Now, why did he see that? Because as a chief of the establishment, his challenge is how to keep the country together. And Pakistani army is losing control. And I think this, to create a conflict with Pakistan, serves the purpose of the Pakistani army, because they can unite the country, saying, oh, India is now going to attack us. India is a threat to the unity of Pakistan, and we have to fight for Kashmir. Since independence, 1947, the Pakistan, is a country. I don't want to go into history because it'll be a very, very long lesson. Pakistan, people say, many analysts say this, Pakistan is a country which is in search of an identity, an idea. What does it stand for, really? There's a great difference between India and Pakistan. India became a democracy. We had the constitution in 3 years, a secular democratic republic with regular elections. On the other hand, Pakistan just fell into the arms of the army. They could not write the constitution for 7-8 years. The first prime minister got assassinated, and then the army took over, and there has been one after another, more than 35-40 years of military dictatorships. So Pakistani, it has never really become a democratic country. It has not been a secular country. It has been in search of an identity, how they keep the country together. And now, as it's falling apart, and the Pakistani army faces the biggest challenge now, not from India, not from Afghanistan, it's facing from the forces within, in Balochistan and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, two big provinces, border provinces. And right now, it needs a conflict. It needs a conflict with India to keep itself united, to keep the army engaged. It's a very dangerous game. It's a high-stakes game, but I think they are playing it because nothing works better than in Pakistan than saying, "Oh, India is about to break Pakistan apart." Because it's happened in the past, in 1971, and they're replaying that, that book to trying to keep themselves together.
So just to make sure I understand it, the thought is that all of those terrorist groups, rebellious groups that are effectively attacking Pakistan and putting pressure, trying to break away these regions, would come together and say, okay, we're going to stop attacking the Pakistani military. We're going to work with the Pakistani military to fight the Indians, because the Indians are now trying to attack Pakistan. That's the thinking that India has in regards to why this might be taking place. Oh, that is fascinating. Do you think India is going to attack? I mean, I show the article with basically Modi is saying, figure out what happened and attack whoever needs to be attacked. You have my full discretion. I mean, they murdered 26 civilians, right? So I totally understand where he's coming from with this. Are they going to attack? And if so, where? I mean, does India even know yet? I mean, has that information been released? Have there been any leaks discussing what Modi's plans are in regards to pursuing some kind of military aggression against Pakistan?
Well, yeah, I think it's absolutely up to the military commanders to decide what actions they take, and that's what the Prime Minister has said. So I can't really comment on what's going to happen. It's going to happen, something going to happen tomorrow or day after. We don't know yet. But we know from history what happened in 2019. 40 Indian soldiers were killed in a bomb blast, in a car bomb blast in the state of Jammu and Kashmir. And soon after, India attacked a base of jihadists in a place called Balakot in the occupied area of Kashmir. And I think, as per the Indian government, more than 350 terrorists were killed in an attack. Of course, Pakistan denied it. Nobody was killed. And before that, I think there have been few military bases been attacked by terrorists inside India. And Indian special forces crossed the border and they attacked some jihadi centers inside Pakistan. So given this background, I mean, we can expect some kind of action against some terrorist organizations or jihadi centers, training centers, or launching pads close to the border of India or inside Pakistan. That's my understanding. That can happen. That's likely to happen. But Jamal was talking about military earlier, and one important point here to remember why Pakistani army needs a conflict at this moment, because Pakistani army in the past 5 years or so, they have lost a lot of credibility in Pakistan. The one reason, because they have not been able to face these challenges in Balochistan and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. And the second reason they have lost a lot of credibility in Pakistan is the meddling in the political affairs against the government of Imran Khan.
Imran Khan, yeah.
Imran Khan. There was a coup against him, orchestrated by the military, Pakistani military, with the full backing of the Biden administration.
Yes.
And there was a lawfare against him, cases against him. He was jailed. He's still in jail. His government was brought down, and they brought back to power the Sharif family. So Pakistani army has been playing this game with the political class for a long time. You know, they are the puppet masters. They put someone in power. When Imran Khan rose to power, there was enough rumors that he was brought to power by Pakistan's military establishment. And they got upset with him, really, because he was talking about what Americans had been doing, the Americans' drone war in Pakistan, inside Pakistan. And he was challenging that narrative. They got upset with him, and they got rid of him. Mm-hmm. And they brought and a Nawaz Sharif family, who were living in exile in London because they have these dozens of corruption cases against him, and all those corruption cases mysteriously disappeared, and they brought back to country, and they're in power. Imran Khan goes to jail. Imran Khan remains one of the most popular leaders in Pakistan. I'm not a fan of Imran. I'm a fan of Imran Khan as a cricket player. He was a great cricket player. Okay, and really a fan of him, a fantastic bowler and a great all-rounder of cricket. Not a big fan of him as a politician, but it's a fact. I mean, the vast majority of Pakistanis now believe that Imran Khan is in jail because of the Pakistani military. First time in the history of Pakistan, when Imran Khan was jailed, people went to the army, to the houses of army brigade commanders, and smashed the houses. They burned those houses. Never before in the history of Pakistan, people have challenged the army or attacked the army openly. This is happening. So the Pakistani establishment, which is basically the army and the intelligence agency, they have a severe crisis now because they're fighting militancy, which is very, very strong, and they're also fighting for the credibility. So they have nothing left how to defend themselves, and nothing better than having a conflict with Pakistan. I think India is not looking for a war. I mean, a war between two nuclear powers is unimaginable. Let's not even go there. I don't even want to talk about it. That's not a possibility. India and Pakistan have not fought a war since 1971, and they will not fight a war. There could be some military action, but war is not a possibility. It should not happen at all, and nobody's talking about it. But
thing was outrageous. It was outrageous. The Biden, when Putin went in for the special military operation, Imran Khan was in Moscow. Now, he didn't know that they were doing it, but the U.S. did not take favorably upon that. And the U.S. in some of the documents that were released pointed out that Imran Khan was aggressively neutral, and that they didn't particularly like the fact that he was aggressively neutral. And hey, if something happens to him, then something happens to him. Basically, they were edging the military on to get rid of the guy. The guy was extremely popular. You had a coup against them. You had all of this political intrigue that was taking place. I think he dissolved the assembly. The courts come in and said that he couldn't dissolve the assembly, in which case they get, it was, I remember covering the story when it was taking place at the station. Outrageous. I can't talk about his politics. He is one of the coolest looking people alive. Yeah, it's outrageous. So
yeah, also important, Jamal, just one thing. He was the first leader in, I think, in the history of Pakistan who was talking about Pakistan having an independent foreign policy. And he used to talk about it in public rallies. And he often quoted India's foreign minister, Dr. Jaishankar. He applauded him for India following an independent foreign policy, especially on the issue of Ukraine, because when the military operations started in Ukraine by Russia, India faced a lot of pressure from the Western countries, from the US, from Europe, to put sanctions against Russia, to cut imports from Russia, all kinds of. But India did not budge. India continued to have an independent foreign policy, keeping its national interest in mind. You may agree or may not disagree with the policies of Indian government, but it's a fact. And Imran Khan used to give this example in public rallies. He used to say, we should be like India and follow on foreign policy. That message was not really liked in Washington, in European capitals. And General Asif Munir, who is the chief of the Pakistani army, he was the main person behind the coup against Imran Khan. And when General Asif Munir went to Washington after Imran Khan was removed from power, he was received by Antony Blinken, Victoria Nuland, you name it. Have you ever heard of the chief of any army in the world being received by State Department? I mean, when the Indian Army chief goes to Washington, he meets his counterpart in Pentagon. That's it. I mean, he doesn't go to State Department. He doesn't go to White House. But when the Pakistani army chief goes to Washington, he's received by the Secretary of State. Long meetings, because they know where the real power lies in Pakistan, and that is the establishment, which means military and intelligence agencies.
J.D. Vance was in India recently, and some people point out that, let's say some people who are looking at this, and they would say, okay, is it a coincidence that J.D. Vance was in India a day before the Kashmir attack took place? Meaning, is there a belief that this is hijinks, that this is something to create conflict, especially with the notion of the relationships between India and China, Pakistan and China, creating chaos in that region of the world? Do you see a connection between this at all? Or this is purely coincidental that J.D. Vance just so happened was in India making a deal at the time that this terrorist attack took place?
If it's a coincidence, it is too much of a coincidence. And again, I'll go back into history. When Bill Clinton went to India in 2001, and before he landed in India, there was another massacre in Kashmir, and 36 Sikhs were killed, and they were pulled out of the houses. And as Clinton was landing in India, and before he could land, 36 Sikhs were killed in Jammu and Kashmir. And again, J.D. Vance goes to India and there's a massacre. Too much of a coincidence. But also, I think in between, Joe Biden has been to India, I think once. Obama went to India, and Donald Trump has been to India. And there was no massacre, no terrorist attack to coincide with these big visits. So why is it happening now? I think it's an important question. I think it's too much of coincidence that a top American official goes to India and there's a massacre before it. I think, as I said, we have to put it in the context of what's happening inside Pakistan and the heat the Pakistani establishment is facing at home. And also they're facing, I think, since the change of guard in Washington, they're under a bit of pressure to go soft on Imran Khan. I think there's some senators and congressmen have already moved a bill called
Yeah.
a Democracy in Pakistan bill, because
Yeah.
Imran Khan, I think, has some kind of support or some kind of relationship with Donald Trump. I've not seen Donald Trump actually supporting the current Pakistani establishment. So I think if you put all these factors together, I think the Pakistani establishment really wants trouble, and they have this, whenever there's a talk of conflict with Pakistan, with India, they start waving the nuclear card. India has not used the word nuclear or nukes, but the
Pakistan.
minister of the Pakistani minister of railways of Pakistan government is saying, "Oh, we have 135 missiles with nuclear warheads and all pointing in India." I think this is a very, very irresponsible talk. It's so, in the Western capitals, they say Iran cannot have a nuclear bomb because Iran is the biggest sponsor of terrorism in the world. That's not true. Iran doesn't sponsor any terrorism, and Iran, as a country, has a right to have a nuclear policy.
They do.
But when Pakistan in the 80s and 90s was not just sponsoring, was a major factory of terrorism, dealing with Al Qaeda. Pakistan created Taliban, by the way. The former ISI chief of Pakistan, whom I interviewed a couple of times, General Hamid Gul, he created Taliban. He's on record, and he always bragged about it. That he was the creator of Taliban. And today Taliban has turned against them. So when Pakistan was indulging in this dirty work of the West and also developing a nuclear bomb, the West didn't do anything about it. They allowed Pakistan to have a nuclear bomb, and they blamed North Korea for giving the nuclear technology to Pakistan, and that is absurd. That's completely absurd. And everybody knew that Pakistan was working on nuclear bomb, and they did explosion in 1998 and declared themselves to be nuclear power, and nobody did everything to stop Pakistan, despite given the record of Pakistan being a terror factory in the region. They have created enough trouble for everyone, for not just for India, for Iran, for Afghanistan, for India, of course, and also in the Xinjiang region of China. There has been a lot of militancy there, and Pakistan had people who are traveling to Pakistan to get training, to get support, everything. So this is the context we are talking about. So Pakistan cannot just wash its hands or say, "Oh, we have nothing to do with it. This is just some random terrorist organization." No, it's not true. I mean, everybody knows that. I mean, I've been to Pakistan. I mean, you have this organization like Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed. They run open centers. They work as charity organizations. They ask for donations on the street for jihad inside Kashmir. So I mean, Pakistan has played a very dirty game. Of course, the defense minister is true. They've done the dirty work of the West. Now they are paying a price for it because they have this homegrown jihadis who have turned against the Pakistani state. But countries like India and Afghanistan are also paying a price for it, because Pakistan has not turned off what is called the terror tap, which runs from Rawalpindi. Rawalpindi is the establishment headquarters. Yeah.
Well, it doesn't seem like they can at this point. As you point out, it seems like the country is coming apart under your analysis. And so, Shobhan, man, this has been a fantastic breakdown. I really do appreciate it. I miss you on this channel. Thank you for this. I really do appreciate it. You have a fantastic day, Brazilian journalist. Well, I can't even say that. I'm going to have to redo your bio because our bio for you is wrong. I have Sao Paulo journalist who is based in Brazil, but covers Indian and Brazilian politics. But at this point, you're associated with the Indian channel covering politics in that region.
Yeah, covering Latin American region, India-Brazil relations, and Indian activities here. Also the BRICS. Brazil has the presidency of the BRICS this year. Just 2 days, Monday and Tuesday, I was at the BRICS foreign ministers meeting, covering for our channel in India. And this is the year of BRICS. This is the year of COP in Brazil. So very important year. A lot of activities, a lot of meetings lined up. We'll have the BRICS Summit in July in Rio de Janeiro. I'm in Rio de Janeiro right now. We'll have the
Oh,
BRICS
I'm
summit
so
here.
jealous. I'm so jealous.
I'm sure you're jealous. You're missing the food here. I'm sorry.
The food is fantastic, man.
Yeah.
I swear to God, the food in Brazil is fantastic. Shobhan, enjoy it. I got to bring you back to talk about the BRICS thing. We didn't get the opportunity to do it today,
No.
but we definitely got
Yeah.
to bring you back to talk about it. Thank you for
My
this, man.
pleasure. It's
You have
always a
one.
pleasure to talk to you, man. And I'm so good to see your channel growing. All the best to you. And we are there
Thank
for you always. Okay.
I appreciate it. You be safe. Have a good one. All right. Shobhan, definitely appreciate Shobhan joining me. It's been a very long time since he's been on the channel, so I'm glad that he's back. But my man is here, Koffi Kouakou. He is a South African, I'm sorry, let me get this right, African analyst, senior research fellow at the Center for African China Studies at the University of Johannesburg. Let me get your bio correct. How you doing, Koffi? You doing okay, man?
Doing well. The sunny, nice temperatures getting cooler and cooler. And so we really doing well.
Excellent.
At least weather-wise, we're doing well.
Well, I know, right? That's the catch, weather-wise.
Yes.
Last week, I didn't get the opportunity to talk to you about it, but I do want to talk to you about it. Zelensky was in South Africa. And I thought to myself, okay, that's awkward. He's in a BRICS country, right? And he's making a speech saying the Russians don't want us in South Africa. The Russians don't want us in Africa. Like, he's making a speech. And he has to know that some of the African countries have pointed out that Ukraine is sponsoring terrorism in those countries.
Yes.
And so it's a bit rich that he's like, the Russians don't want us in Africa. Okay, fair enough. The South African president, Ramaphosa, comes on and on some level contradicts Zelensky, effectively saying, hey, maybe you need to give up territory to stop this war. I would imagine that didn't necessarily go down well. Describe the scene to us and the weirdness I would imagine that Ramaphosa was in as he has bringing Zelensky into the country. By the way, why did he invite Zelensky? Why did he even allow him to come to South Africa?
Yeah, look, Jamal, this was a really bizarre thing for all of us, paying attention, observers and the media and analysts and so forth, that, while he's on the target line of President Trump, and he himself has been, sort of a little bit battered by President Trump's administration and so forth, and also Zelensky. So, Zelensky is also under that same, ire by Trump and his administration. And why invite this guy over here, attempting to find a peace where you have very little leverage or control?
Yeah.
And so we are still baffled because we still don't figure out where is President Ramaphosa is going to get that strength to be able to leverage, create some kind of conditional peace and get Ukraine to buy into it. And in fact, if I want to say so, I think, beside the sort of very diplomatic niceties that we see with government jargon and so forth, I don't think this has been a really successful trip for Zelensky, because he had to short circuit, to cut short his trip, because the Russians were already attacking Kyiv. So last Thursday, he had to leave, I think, the next Friday or so. So it gave a little bit of sort of, bad aftertaste in the mouth of people watching all this, flying all the way from Ukraine, coming to South Africa, and then rushing back. So for me, I don't think it was a successful trip. At the same time, he left a bit of bitterness in Zelensky's own mouth, because he's probably not even getting what he's looking for, beside the sort of image-looking, attempting to get African sign-off on his on his behalf, which didn't work quite well, because in fact most Africans have been very quiet. Not all of them are buying to this Ukraine, to Zelensky's pledge. Although we know, you may remember a couple of years ago, President Cyril Ramaphosa led a delegation to Ukraine, which was poorly received. In his hand, he had a 10-point plan, which he wanted to propose, and gosh, this thing didn't go anywhere. But at the heart of the plan is to say, we're looking for peace. We want to go through the United Nations process to get this peace. But most important, the war must stop without, and then negotiation without conditions need to take place, and people need to stop getting killed there. I mean, this is basically what comes out of it. But at the political parties, opposition parties here in South Africa, were having none of it. They were really opposed to this thing. They were not quite happy. Although historically, there was some kind of tie between most struggle groups like the African National Congress and Liberation Movement in Southern Africa with Ukraine. But that was during the time of the Soviet Union, when the arm end of the African National Congress, called Mkhonto weSizwe, had his members trained in Odessa in Ukraine, which really was during apartheid area. So that's the only real link there. Many of them trained there. They learned to use Kalashnikovs and stuff. But there was some challenges to this visit, of course. The biggest one and the controversy is that most of these political parties were not happy. Two of them, the economic freedom fighters with Malema, and then the Mkhonto weSizwe party of the former president Jacob Zuma, who vehemently opposed this visit. And in fact, the Mkhonto weSizwe party had a huge protest at the union buildings in Pretoria, saying that Zelensky was some kind of puppet for the Western imperialists. Imperialists. I mean, I can't say. Yeah, I can't use the words some of the guys were using, but they were really harsh. Yeah. And the EFF also thought, my goodness, this was some kind of, they don't like Zelensky because they describe him as some puppet president, and again, that his visit was a contradiction to South Africa's non-aligned stance on peace, on the BRICS. That Zelensky was favored by the West, and he's a sort of a clown, a comedian who managed to get on board. I mean, they were really rough. So
no
these
lies
were some
detected.
the only
no lies detected. I agree with everything they just said. I mean, they probably they have. Even Marco Rubio acknowledges that is our proxy.
Yes. Yes.
So when they're saying that, they're not entirely wrong. Like when he's begging them for weapons, when he's talking to the Europeans, like that's very specific, right? And if South Africa is like, look, we're not aligned with any of this stuff. We're in BRICS. We don't want to be a part of the war, either on one side or the other. We want not, It's bad.
Yeah. But I must say, one of the political parties, mainly the Democratic Alliance, called here DA, was quite supportive.
I can imagine.
And they're mainly a white party, so they're sort of playing the imperialist position. Yes. So they were kind of supporting that. And one of the things there, one of the ministers is part of the government of national unity by the name of Leon Schreiber. And I'm sure you and I discussed this, I think, last year. So he is pushing for some kind of visa-free relationship agreement between Ukraine and South Africa. And people are saying, no, we don't want that to happen, although he's pushing it hard. And the president, Cyril Ramaphosa, said, no, it hasn't arrived. I need to sign off on this, but we're not aligning to this yet. Yeah. Wow. But even one of the things for me that I looked at, I thought, my goodness, how this visit was perceived by the Trump administration. Of course, it was badly perceived. There was no clear, some kind of press release by the Trump administration that dismissed it as some kind of fluke. And of course, they're not happy with both people who were meeting. Not happy with Zelensky, that Trump called a dictator. And then, of course, also not happy with South Africa. And, if Trump and his administration are not calling South Africa a bad place to be, a terrible, to use his jargon. Yeah, he's been those diplomatic tension with South Africa. So this meeting really was not a very successful one, I must say. But the media had a great coverage of it all over the place. They were doing their best to inform people. But I would think at the elite level, yes. But at the regular people, the masses and so forth, there was very little, not even a flag somewhere to say that, there's a guy called Zelensky, former comedian, who's now president of Ukraine in town. It just flew so fast.
Yeah. I gotta hit Burkina Faso. I am fascinated by what is taking place with that. So Ibrahim Traore, am I pronouncing the last word? Traore?
Traore. Traore, yes. Or you can say Traore as they do.
Traore. Okay, let's go with Traore. I can hit that one. My mouth can do that.
It's easier.
He has been a successful leader up to this point. The West hates him. They hate him. And apparently they were trying to get rid of him. I mean, and this could be pressure that's being applied to all of the Sahel states that broke away from ECOWAS and have effectively defined their own country. When I say he's been successful, they have paid down the debt. They've started to pave roads. Meaning they've started to make progress in a way that wasn't being made prior. And yet the West hates him and tried to get rid of him, if I understand this correctly. Go into this for me. Explain what is happening in Burkina Faso with him specifically.
Well, I mean, as you and I have been on this road for a while, but to summarize this, there's a young man. I mean, most of these countries in West Africa have been going through huge oppression by colonial rules on the economy, on the politics, who to choose to run the country, what to do, to look at the currency. So the idea of sovereignty has been a big one since the 60s.
Right.
Like 23 to 24 African presidents who wanted to escape that colonial yoke were assassinated, right, Jamal? I mean, this is very traumatic, and they do this on purpose because they know if they kill these leaders, others will take time. They won't even bother trying to say, oh, we want to liberate our countries. Many fall in line, and they become sort of deputizing the colonial regimes that they support, they do anything to really maintain those regimes. We see that in West Africa. Only very recently, the past 2 or 3 years, we've seen the rise of the populations in most of these countries, especially in Mali, starting with, in fact, it started in, not in West Africa, but in Central African Republic, but it's died down a bit, but it moved to Mali. They had a coup there. The military took over, and then it moved to Burkina Faso. There are a couple of, they've had about 2 coups there as well. And then you also have in Niger. And these 3 countries now are being governed by military rulers. And interesting enough, they seem to have some kind of, it's not really, I wouldn't call it a Pan-Africanist bent, but it's a yearning for them to sort of escape this continuous colonial imperialist yoke, both politically and economically, but also socially, ethically, language-wise, the justice system, everything else, right? So to come back to the case of Burkina Faso falls right into that. They've got many of their leaders also killed, dismissed, and so forth. And when this young man shows up, he's 37 years old, Ibrahim Traore, is now making deep, serious structural transformational changes in his country that start from, the wealth of the country, to whom that belongs, how to use it, who should run it, who should decide where the priorities are, with the goal of the country. In fact, this is the biggest one, and I'm sure you're aware that General Langley of the AFRICOM last week was very, very, in Congress, he said he was just made a dismissive comment to congressmen there, saying that President Ibrahim Traore is using the gold to buy himself his position where he is. He's sending it to the Russians. I mean, is this your money? Is this your gold? But we know what gold really creates. And he's managed to nationalize 2 gold mines and managed to establish a no gold refinery thanks to the Russians and the Chinese. They're now producing their own gold. And the implication for that is huge, Jamal, in the sense that if they can produce their own gold, they can have enough money or resources to pay their debts, to organize themselves, and even potentially, because there's 3 countries now of the Sahel, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, are thinking about having a bank, a regional bank with a specific currency backed by gold. My goodness, didn't Gaddafi try to do that anyway, Scale? And we can see that coming back. Yeah. And worse of it, he's now escaped. I can't even keep track of the failed coups. And then this past week, he escaped another coup plus a poison attack by one of his trusted people who put some kind of very bizarre substance called VXT42, to be more precise, some kind of odorless stuff, and put in his tea, and they've given him tea to drink, and he was alerted by somebody else before, so they managed to really sort of foil this coup and this attack. So he's really under enormous amount of pressure. He's doing great. In fact, today, the international organization and NGOs that are really going on a protest, international protest to support Ibrahim Traore. And he has so much fandom, not just fandom, but he has become now some kind of, if you want, the symbol of the freedom, not just in Africa or West Africa, but a symbol of freedom for most of these sort of global South nations that are still under the yoke of imperialism. Very interesting going on.
And they have tried to kill him multiple times, and he's been able to escape the assassination attempts all of those times.
Indeed. He's got really, first of all, I would say, not that many of us believe in luck per se, but, preparedness. He's aware of what's going on. His life is in danger. His family's life is in danger. His closest friends' lives are in danger. Even people he used to trust are now betraying him for money, for ego, for all kinds of things. And we know it. The psychology of power and leadership deals with these kind of betrayals. And many of us are very worried that he may not even make it, because we're praying, crossing our fingers, but also organizing so that he gets some really good support so that nobody kills him. Because his success is going to be the success of many African countries, to just get rid of these sort of, colonial yoke on them.
And he is effectively creating a gold reserve for Africa. I mean, people need to realize how big that is. I mean, if you have gold, you effectively have money. I mean, that's just cash, right? You can do whatever you want with it. You can build roads, you can build highways, you can build cars, you can build a bank, as you pointed out. You can lend money, you can pay down debt. That is, the potential for it is very extreme, especially if you have your own gold mines that the country itself owns. That's astonishing.
Yeah, look, the future of gold. In fact, I'm going to send you 2 articles that I wrote about 2 years ago on Africa and gold. And key to it is there's more and more movement towards using gold as a, sort of backing people's currencies. Right. And you can already see that gold is shooting up. Gold is now, I think, about $3,300 something. Now, I would think, in fact, I thought gold should go much higher. But we know the price of gold is controlled in London. I can't go more than that. I'll send you the piece I wrote so you see all the nitty-gritties. But what is important is it has huge implication for de-dollarization. The dollar is a fiat currency. It's really not backed by serious, gold or anything else. And there are even suspicions that the U.S. doesn't have the kind of gold reserve it's been talking about. In fact, President Trump was saying to Scott Bessent, look, I want to check the gold we have at Fort Knox and make sure, I think it's in Tennessee, making sure, not far away from a military base, saying, we want to know if the gold is there. But not only Scott Bessent, but also Jerome Powell told him, look, the gold is there. But Trump is a guy who believes in seeing stuff he wants to see.
I want to see what
exactly. Do we really have this goal, or is just, to use this expression, fake news, right? So, and there have been 2 weeks ago or so, last month, there was some really good research coming out and say, hey, it seems like the gold reserve of both of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger combined may be more than that of the United States. This is a powerful statement there. And if these three countries can really combine and succeed, I can tell you, Jamal, the continent's going to see there'll be a wave of transformation where they can deal with their own, but it's going to be tough. It's a tough challenge because the West, especially France and Europeans, and of course the Americans, are also part of this whole plot against President Ibrahim Traore, and then Mali, Assimi Goïta, and then also in Niger. Won't let this happen. They're still lurking there. They have their spies, their people to try to kill them. And we're very worried, but we need to support them.
This is the Gaddafi thing, as you pointed out. Gaddafi wanted a Pan-African continent. He wanted, Libya was rich beyond measure. Like, it is hard to get across how much money it was in Libya and how rich he was. And I was watching this interview where they pointed out that Gaddafi, they wanted him to be killed. Meaning it wasn't like, you can step down. It's like, no, we don't want you to step down. We want you to die. We want this idea of a Pan-African thing to die. We want the fact that Libya is rich to die. We want it to go away. And so the fact that these guys are effectively nationalizing banks, or let's say nationalizing gold mines, and then printing and refining gold, and can use that gold for whatever they want. I mean, they're effectively printing gold bars. So
yes, they have their gold bars. Yeah, Burkina Faso's got the old bars, yeah.
So are they going to do the bank? Is that the idea? That we're going to use that gold in order to back a currency? We're going to have a bank for it. We're going to loan money out to other African, I guess, countries or businesses and those type of things in order to rebuild. Like, meaning, is this the is using for rebirth and regeneration?
The blunt answer to your, Jamal, is nothing else. Yes. That's it. But they can't get there if you don't have, because there are two types of securities. The first one, which is a sort of very soft one, is economic security, very soft to a large degree, getting the economy going, running one or another, where the gold's going to play a big role, right? That's hard currency and wealth. But if you're wealthy enough and you don't have hard power to protect yourself, you're vulnerable. Exactly, military. So one thing that they've understood, and in fact, China and Russia have understood this a long time ago, you must back and protect that economic security with military security as well. Both go hand in hand, because if not, you're going to get killed, destroyed, and then your wealth stolen. Same that happened to Gaddafi. That's what all of them are now saying. We don't want that. So they're now building their own militaries very quietly. As I was telling you the last time, there were rumors that the leftover weapons from Russia, Syria, I wouldn't call it debacle, but sort of retreat. A part of that landed in the Sahel, in Burkina Faso, and in Mali, and also in Niger, which is a quite sensible thing to do. You don't have to take it back to Moscow. You just send it over to these guys here, and they're building that slowly. And they're building that slowly, and it's worrying the Europeans because it's not fending them off, because they can't do what they used to do with the terrorists. And the big fight beside those two security areas, which mean the hard military, backing, and then the soft security, economic security. Now, the biggest war is information warfare. Yes. And they are on cyber war. I mean, the information, if you tune into the internet, it's the biggest war. I mean, propaganda, but also making sure that you can dismiss, you can disinform people, you can malinform people. And it's ongoing through the Europeans, especially the French. The Americans are also involved in it. But one thing I can tell you is the side of the African is winning. It's just unbelievable how they've sort of flooded the internet. Every day, there's at least hundreds of videos about how Ibrahim Traore must be supported to be out there. And so they're also winning that, reputational, sort of digital reputational war, digital information warfare.
Well, I would tell you, I had people contact me on the story saying, hey, you got to cover this. You got to cover this. They're going after him. They're trying to take him down. And even people on the channel, like in the chat the other day, was like, you must cover the story. They're taking a minute. I said, Koffi is in the bush, where he will be on next week. I said, he will be on. I've asked him about it. This is something we're going to talk about. No, man, this Koffi, this is the assassination attempts are not fantastic news. I would imagine he had to know that if he was going to be in that position, that he would have a target on him. But what he is doing and what the Sahel states are doing, if they are successful, oh my God, it's just astonishing.
Yeah. And their success also going to rely not only on themselves, but also on their own population, but also some help from Russia and China.
Right.
Because they won't be able to do it by themselves, because they will be overwhelmed by the West, the power of the West, that they did for Gaddafi, they did for Iraq, they did for Iran and Syria, and they need that support. And more people are now waking up. And I think that sort of waking up by the population themselves, going down the streets, protesting at embassies, has really, really opened up some room and support. And hopefully, if those leaders are not killed, it will be an astonishing transformation coming up very, very soon. But of course, the worry now is that some of the African countries are now used as bases for Western nations to attack. Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. Cote d'Ivoire, for example, has become one of their bases. And as you know, the U.S. and Africa Command, Langley, was in Cote d'Ivoire, and they're now attempting to sort of put together a U.S. military base in the northwestern part of the country, up north. And I have the strong feeling that probably President Trump, and we're crossing our fingers so that he can cut this off as part of the DOGE expenditure, compliance or whatever it is. We are hoping he's going to do that, but we're not quite sure. So it's a big game out there. But one thing is for sure, the region is not yet stable because of the presence of these military bases. The French still have them there. Don't buy the idea that the French have left Ivory Coast, because in the newspapers you used to see, no, they haven't. They're still there. Although they've reduced the troops there, but they're still solid, not only militarily, but also economically. They're very, very powerful.
Koffi, man, you are fantastic. Thank you for this great breakdown, great explanation of what is going on. My hopes are with them on this. A revitalization of Africa would be amazing, especially if it's something that spreads from West Africa to the rest in almost a wave. Koffi Kouakou, he is African analyst, senior research fellow at the Center for Africa-China Studies at the University of Johannesburg. Thank you for this, man. Be safe, okay?
Thanks for having me, Jamal, and see you soon.
Always appreciate this conversation. I really do. Thank you. All right. I see Ted Rall is in the background somewhere. See you connect his mic. Okay. Ted is coming on. Ted will be here soon. Political analyst, cartoonist, syndicated columnist, host of the TMI show, Too Much Information, with the great, the awesome, the beautiful Manila Chan. There he is. There you are. How's it going, Ted? You doing okay, man?
I'm all right. How are you?
I'm doing okay. I'm making it. I'm still kicking, against all odds. I am glad that you could join me. As always, I gave the intro for you already. Political analyst, cartoonist, syndicated columnist, host of the TMI show with the beautiful, the great Manila Chan. Ted, I think what I want to hear with you at the very least in the beginning, let me close some of these windows. The audience doesn't realize this. It's not that I'm completely disorganized. There are like 30 different windows that I'm like, they're trying to make work. So let me ask you this to start. And not necessarily get it back and forth. I'm just curious on if your point of view has shifted any. Negotiations. So Witkoff, Bloomberg reported this today. And then I want to go to Trump, because Trump did an ABC interview that I think is just laughable in many respects. His inability to tell the truth is astonishing. U.S. Representative Witkoff tried to convince Putin to accept Trump's peace terms, or no avail. Now, I say no duh to that just because of what Trump was offering in his peace terms. One of the terms that Donald Trump wanted was for the United States to run the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant, the plant that Ukraine had been bombing for the longest time. Something that Russia, under their constitution, has as Russian territory. And it's like, okay, are you serious right now? Like, are you guys being serious? Like, some of the stuff, he doesn't seem to get that from the Russian point of view, this is existential. And that their constitution has these territories as theirs. Now, it doesn't mean that Putin can't give a speech where he's like, finagle that, like give some kind of political language to make that work, like, enhance interrogation as opposed to torture. He's a politician after all. He can pull that off. But some of this stuff is so grotesque that you can't get it across the finish line. And one of Russia's demands is effectively, we need Ukraine to acknowledge that the territories that we have are now Russian territory, and their people are to get the F off. That means unconditional surrender, because the only way you're going to get Ukraine to do that is for them to surrender and for them to say, okay, we quit. Fine, those are yours. Let's move on, right? And to make it even worse, Trump can't even get Zelensky back his plan. Like, that's his proxy. That's his own guy. He can't even get his own guy to say, okay, I would accept your plan. Even rhetorically, just for the sake of putting it on the Russians to say, see, they're not playing ball. If you can't get your own guy to say yes, how do you plan on getting the opposition that you've been fighting for the last 3 years to say yes? Like, I don't know how they mind that gap. That's where I'm at. I don't see how to come together with that. And I can't even tell if Trump is making his deal purely just to walk. What is your take? You've been watching this just as much as I have. You've worked at the station.
I have. I'm a little more optimistic than you are, I think, as you know, Jamal. I think this is more likely than not. Look, it could fall apart, but I think it's likelier than not to work out in the end. And I think sooner rather than later. The problem here is Zelensky. Look, first of all, you said, he's Trump's own guy. Well, let's be fair. He's Biden's own guy. Trump inherited him, this troublesome ally, right? He's not the ally that Trump would have picked, right? Yeah. He's not the guy that if Trump could snap his fingers and decide who the head of Ukraine was going to be, it wouldn't be Vladimir Zelensky. Yeah. So so he's stuck with him. It's a holdover. I mean, this is kind of not unlike JFK inheriting the Bay of Pigs scheme from Eisenhower when he came into the presidency, and he's like stuck with this crap that he has to deal with. So I think the problem for Zelensky is he has no political future in Ukraine whatsoever if he formally completely rolls and has to go back to his people and say, particularly his bosses, and say, I lost everything. I completely unconditionally surrendered. Zelensky will be dead soon, right? Yeah. I mean, it's a gangster state. So he's not going to, so that's not possible. So in a negotiation, it's kind of like, even when one side has completely been as completely defeated as possible, that's not Ukraine. Ukraine has not been as completely defeated as is possible to be defeated militarily. Right. Imperial Japan, 1945, that qualifies, right? Yeah. But and so the Japanese unconditionally surrendered, but there was something they needed. They needed the emperor to stay in office, and it's kind of like it would have been entirely. I'm sure the debate, and I know the debate inside, the halls of power in the War Department at the time must have been like, fuck those guys. We just nuked them twice. We own their ass. Our army's in Tokyo. Fuck them and fuck their emperor, right? But cooler heads prevailed because they realized, listen, they need this. So when you're negotiating with your adversary, you have to sort of recognize what they need. The Russians are going to have to realize that there's certain things Zelensky needs in order to be able to survive, in order to be able to get to the table and sign this. And I think it's going to come down to de facto admission, acknowledgement of Russian gains, as opposed to de jure admission. So as long as Ukraine freezes the conflict along, basically we have a crisis right now in Pakistani and Indian Kashmir. Right. There's after the 1947-1948 Kashmir first Kashmir War, first of three, the UN came in, the new UN came in and established the line of control, which is basically Kashmir is a frozen conflict since 1948, although not so frozen. There's been fighting across the line of control. But that line of control is basically, it is the border in between Indian and Pakistani Kashmir. That's what we're going to need to see in Ukraine. There's going to be a line of control between Russian and Ukrainian forces, perhaps a DMZ, you know, kind of like where the Ukrainians can't get too close to the line of control, or the Russians both can't get too close, or there's a no man's land, something like that. But I think a DMZ would make sense to sort of provide a cooling off. Maybe it's a 20-mile zone, 10 miles on each side of the border. But the point is, that's what the Ukrainians are going to have to basically tacitly concede. This is the new state of affairs. And like on their maps, they can still teach Ukrainian school children, this is our territory, we lost it. One day we will get it back, but right now we can't get it back. Sort of like the way China claims Taiwan as part of their own. And it's like, well, we'll come and get it later, maybe, but it's going to have to be that sort of gray area. The Russians are going to have to accept that if they want a peace deal, because the Russians are going to get everything else they want. They are going to get, you know, first of all, they have the territory. They're not giving it up.
Right.
And so who cares? That's the conversation, if I were Trump, I would have with Putin. I'd
But
say,
see,
look,
they only have a percentage of the territory. That's the rub. They've put it into their constitution that all of that territory is theirs. And when they're looking at the regime that's in play, they got rid of the political parties. They got rid of the media. They went after the Russian language, Russian church. And so
those
it's like, okay,
those things have to be.
yeah, that's a big deal, right? It's like if you are Putin and part of your rationale for the war was, okay, you guys are killing ethnic Russian Ukrainians and you're going after all of these devices that make Ukraine neutral. That's a problem for me. And so it's like, how do you end the war and leave the regime in place that did all that stuff?
Well, the regime won't stay in place because after the defeat, Ukrainian domestic politics will take care of it. It would be my answer to Putin. I'd say, don't worry about it. As soon as the defeat has been, I mean, bear in mind, the ordinary Ukrainian citizens have been living under a media blackout because of the things that you've been talking about. They don't really know what's going on, right? Well, it's all going to become clear, you know, once the defeat is upon them, and that defeat is going to be laid firmly at Zelensky's feet. He wasn't a popular president before the war, so we're just going to go back to the antebellum state of affairs, right? And so, if I were some problems, you don't have to do anything about; they just go away because of the new state of affairs. You know, if I'm Putin, I would definitely insist on, you know, Russian language rights being restored, the Russian Orthodox Church being restored, things like that. But you know, in terms of, it's best to be seen. If I were Putin, I wouldn't want to be seen as like being responsible for regime change in Kiev. It's like let the unpopular Zelensky sink of his own accord. He will. And, you know, and that's fine. You know, it's not a problem. So I think this is all like, I think the Russians are going to come to the table because it's going to be a good deal. You know, sanctions are going away, trading, normalized relations, tourism is going to be restored, you know, back into the SWIFT system. The Russians keep their gains. The U.S. acknowledges Crimea as Russian. I mean, most of Russia's problems from the U.S. and Ukraine go away from this. So, you know, don't look a gift horse in the mouth. You know, not to mention you're not going to get a better deal under President Vance or under, you know, President Newsom or, you know, whoever. You're just not going to.
I agree with you. They don't necessarily want to be seen as regime change. That I agree with you. But a frozen conflict.
Because if they wanted to, they could have. I mean, they fought the war with one hand tied behind their back, right? I mean, they had a huge standing army. They didn't send them. If they wanted to topple Zelensky, they could have over the last 3 years. They didn't want to.
Yeah, they fought the war in a very particular way. I mean, regardless of what the West say, they didn't fight this as if, you know, a UFO had invaded and they needed to all hands on deck. That, you know, they fought it in a very particular way. They wasn't trying to flatten Kiev. They didn't try to flatten much of Ukraine. So I agree with you on that front. It's just frozen conflicts have a tendency to become unfrozen. There's no reason for them to trust the West or the United States, for that matter, specifically. And who knows the next president that comes in that immediately unfreezes it. Meaning, I get the feeling that from Putin's point of view, I want to settle this now. I don't want this to happen 10 years later. I don't want this to happen 5 years later. I want to settle it now. I don't want NATO to expand. They're already surrounding our borders. Russia has been building up on the Finnish border just because Finland has now been part of NATO, so they have to defend that particular territory. They're increasing their military to 1.5 million, meaning from their point of view, Europe is gearing for war. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, as I've told my audience, the next 5 years is going to be very interesting and see how this shakes out, because I don't have balls enough to predict it. I really don't. I don't know. If Trump stinks it up royally and a rando Democrat comes in and liberals are still in this mindset of we must fight the Russians, okay, then what happens? And if you're Putin and you know that.
Yeah, you do know that. That's a problem.
Yeah, that's a problem. That's what I mean. That's what I mean. That's a problem.
Also, he's, don't forget, he's been at this for a long time, right? I mean, he's been president of Russia for a long time. He's pretty old. I mean, he can see 80 from his house. Yeah. So, it's kind of like he's probably he's got to be thinking, even though, for a guy his age, he's an exquisite health. It's still like, I mean, remember those rumors? Like, oh, he's going to drop dead any second. Huh, whatever happened there? It's like, he should be dead now, right? So anyway, that's so funny because you just forget about all that crap, and then it's like, oh yeah, the Russians are going to get their asses kicked. Zelensky's going to be dancing on Lenin's tomb in Red Square. Like, that's funny. That shouldn't happen. So yeah, or the coup is going to overthrow Putin or whatever. Anyway, point is, it's going to be, it's like if I'm Putin, I'm like, like he's a very measured, extremely careful man. Yes. And he is very aware, he's aware of history. You know, he can just start prattling off about, 16th century, Central European politics anytime he wants. So he knows that, like, in negotiations, like the Rolling Stones said, you can't always get what you want, but you might get what you need. He's going to get what he wants, and he's going to get what he needs. Yeah. See, I don't know. Why wouldn't he? I mean, come on, this is a good deal. It's like there's a few little nits that like the nuclear power plant. They could work that out. That's not that big a deal. Now, I mean, and there's certain things that are just ridiculous.
I mean, that's American troops.
There's some things that are ridiculous. Like, there's not going to be any American troops there. There's not going to be any NATO troops there. I mean, that's just not going to be. That's just stupid because you can't. You need neutral parties. You can have Fijian troops there, no problem. That's not even so outrageous. They turn up. No, it's all over the place, right?
We will see how flexible those red lines are. We'll see. I mean, because look, if he accepts any of that, he would have to go back to the Russian people and explain how for the last X number of years, and oh, by the way, I know it was in our constitution, but, and I know I said this, but, and
yeah, but I think Russia would like to see this. Most Russian people would like to see this war over too.
I think most of Russian people would like to be secure.
Yeah,
and ending it on freezing the territory is not really security.
No, I mean, like look at China and Taiwan. Look at. But
Turkey, that's different.
Look at Iraq and Kurdistan. There's a lot of. I mean, no one in the world has more frozen conflict zones around it than Russia. They have the Transnistria. They have Nagorno-Badakhshan. They have all these places that are kind of like ever since the Soviet, split up.
I know, Ted, but all of those are also pressure points that are used to exploit in times of decide. Meaning, I would wager to you that what the U.S. is waiting for is, okay, We need to get to a point where Europe has built up their military, where
Mm.
Europe is stronger, and we can do this once again. And I
Oh,
would
well,
wager to you that
I
that
can
is
see
exactly
that.
what Russia's thinking, that they are preparing. They just need time to get to a point where they can build their industries, get ready to do this. I don't believe
see. If I had Putin's ear, I would say, look, you can use AI to extrapolate Europe's military capacity over the next 10, 20, 30, 50 years. They're not going to get there because, I mean, if you just look at the relative power of Russia versus Europe now, I mean, it would be like they can't even support Ukraine now.
it'd be
I mean,
decades.
Russia's going to continue to expand, get more powerful, grow. You know, it's like both sides. I mean, the Europeans are not going to catch up, and the Europeans have major demographic issues, you know, birth rate issues that are dragging down their rate of economic growth. They're aging populations. Yeah, Russia has issues too, but Russia has like virgin territory. They have new relationships that are going to expand their economy beyond their wildest dreams. I mean, it was always crazy that they were they were frenemies at most with China back during the Soviet period. They even fought a war. But like now, they're actually buds, right? That's massive. Russia always needed that. Now they've got it. You know, BRICS is huge. BRICS is like beyond belief. Europe is kind of like, yeah, they can keep growing 2% a year. But you know, but Russia's going to grow 15% a year. If I wouldn't be like, sure, it's in the back of their minds. Also, I don't think and I think really truly, European politics is moving to the right and more towards isolationism.
Agreed.
And supporting Ukraine is like not popular now. It's going to become less popular. It's not like in 20 years people are like, yeah, the French are going to be like, let's get Ukraine. Like,
I do agree with you on that point. That the trend to the right is explicitly because of what is taking place in regards to Ukraine. Now, that I agree with you on. Yeah, that I agree with you on. Maybe I'm more of a hard ass on this than you are. I don't trust the U.S. I don't trust Europe in the way that
I don't trust them either.
Yeah.
But, you know, you have to negotiate with people you don't trust. That's who you negotiate with.
Oh, I don't take issue with the negotiation. I take issue with the losing side trying to dictate terms. That's what I take issue with.
Well, I mean, so I guess what I would argue to Putin, and if I were his general, I'd say, well, if you want to roll that way, then we're going to have to go to Kiev and burn the whole place down. And you don't want that. I don't want that. It's not worth it. You know, this was always meant to be like a swat on the nose.
Special military operation.
Like, cut it out. Stop. Right. Don't join NATO. Quit fucking with us. That's what this was always meant to be. If he wants to go in heavy, you know, it's a whole different ball game. And you know, it's like take the victory while you can get it. It's like it's an easy victory. Just take it.
Ted, this has not been an easy victory. They've expended 100 to 200,000 Russian troops.
Sure.
You've had nearly 600, 800,000 dead Ukrainians. Also, that is not an easy victory. That is a war.
Well, I mean, okay, I don't mean to make light of the loss of life or the money, right? The loss of treasure. But the fact is, for a country, you know, that has a 500 plus year history, they take the long view. And when you've lost 28 million men in your last big war, this is kind of not that big a deal.
I'm sorry. The Soviet Union lost 28 million men. Russia, as an independent country, did not.
That was half of the Soviet Union.
Fair enough. I'm just pointing out that it was the entirety of the Soviet Union that fought that war.
Sure.
And resources of all of those countries that fought that war. This is an independent Russia fighting against all of the forces of NATO and the United States. Like I don't know. I can't.
It wasn't a total war, but you know, Ukraine is a proxy war. It's not a total war the way World War II was.
Agreed. Yeah, maybe I'm more of a hard ass on this. For my point, you have to solve this issue. This cannot be a festering wound that just lingers.
I mean, you know, Russia's going to get 85 to 90% of what it wants, so that's pretty good. You know, I mean, honestly. And like, honestly, like at this point, Russia now finds itself in a situation not unlike China. China has, ever since Deng Xiaoping, they've been like, we're not trying to spread, communism to the rest of the world. We just want to make money. And that's where Russia's at. They have that opportunity. They can go down that road now. And they know that.
They were going down that road. They kept being fucked with.
But they go down that road on the Ukrainian border, bigger way than they ever could have. The war created a completely new polarity. It is the economic changes are massive.
Yeah.
Russia didn't have a lot of really reliable trading partners.
They do now.
Now it does.
Yeah, they do now. I keep saying that war has changed the world in real times. KJ, you're a little bit early. I'm going to get to you in a moment. Let me finish with Okay, he's good. I want to hit a few of these videos with Trump. Thank you for that conversation, Ted, because I definitely want to get your opinion on how you were saying it. I am more of a hard ass on this. For me, it needs to be a definitive win, not this nonsense of Rubio of like, this can go on for 3 years and nobody's going to win it. No, not that. It needs to be clear. You lost. You were screwing with us. You lost. You went with the stab in the back myth that we were just wanting to take over all of Europe. That wasn't the situation. You lost. We need to make it clear, definitive. We need to solve this issue for the foreseeable future. And if that means staying Kiev, damn it, that means staying Kiev. But who knows? On the negotiating table, maybe Trump.
Well, and there's another aspect to this too, which is, normalization of relations is probably going to occur, even if there is no peace in Ukraine. I mean, the U.S. wants these relations to go back to better than they ever were.
Trump does.
So, yeah, Trump does. So that's also another thing, right? I mean, there's not really pressure on Putin in any kind of meaningful way. I mean, things are getting, things are looking good no matter what. He doesn't even have to settle this in Ukraine. He could, it's a side project. It's not like, the sanctions are being held, like, oh, we're gonna maintain them unless you make peace with. He was saying that. That's not true anymore.
Yeah.
So there's been, Witkoff has made considerable progress. I mean, he's obviously done yeoman's work there as a diplomat. I give him props. Good for him.
Yeah. Let's see how fungible Trump's quote unquote final peace plan is.
Yeah.
And let's see, I guess, where Putin's red lines, how red those red lines are. And whether or not Trump can get Europe on board. That's the other issue, right?
Right.
Oh, it's fascinating. Did you see Trump's ABC interview? This is one of the most ludicrous interviews.
I heard about it, but I did not see it.
I'm going to show you how much time do we have? Damn it, we spent so much time talking about that. That's fine. It was a good conversation. Some of the stuff is just ludicrous. Trump, some of the stuff is just demonstrative, provable lies, and he still goes with it. So I want to go to one, though, that he was actually right about. They asked him, has the reputation of the United States been tarnished by you being president? Which is funny, right? You ask the president, hey, do you think we're humiliated by you being in office? That's what they're asking him, right? Listen to what he says here, because what he's saying, believe it or not, for one, the answer is yes, but it wasn't better under Joe Biden either. So I'm going to play the clip. I don't want to get your take on it.
Do you think the reputation of the United States has gone down under your presidency?
No, I think it's gone way up, and I think we're a respected country again. We were laughed at all over the world. We had a president that couldn't walk up a flight of stairs, couldn't walk down a flight of stairs, couldn't walk across the stage without falling. We had a president that was grossly incompetent. You knew it, I knew it, and everybody knew it, but you guys didn't want to write it because you're fake news.
All right. Thank you.
And by the way, ABC is one of the worst. I have to be honest.
He does. By the way, just so the audience, if you're not clear, that was ABC that he was doing the interview with. He waits. The interviewer is like, all right, I'm going to close this. By the way, you guys are the worst, just in case you know it. Oh, that is hilarious. We didn't get that under Joe Biden. We didn't get the comedy.
No, the comedy. I mean, that's the thing is he's endlessly entertaining, and there's no doubt about that. I mean, yesterday was the 100th day of his presidency, and I've been talking to other people about the good, bad, and the ugly of, and we kind of know what the good, the bad, and the ugly are. But the thing is, he's really entertaining. And every single day, there's something new coming out of this White House. Now, most of these things are things I don't like.
Yeah.
But still, I mean, the thing is, you definitely get a sense like, hey, things are happening. Like all eyes are on 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. That's very much not been the way it's been. Usually it's like there's this campaign. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. Big promises, and then then the January 20th happens. Big speech, lots of promises, and then crickets.
Right.
Nothing happening. It's like, and this time, that's not the case at all.
It
really is like an FDR style first 100 days, except with very different kind of priorities.
Yeah, and that much accomplished in those priorities. I mean, he's been moving. It's a lot of activity.
Moving fast.
Yeah. Give me your take on the 100 days. And this could be the last question, because you brought up a really good point. Like, it's been 100 days. Like you said, I haven't liked much of what's come out of these 100 days.
No.
Fair enough. But give me your take on it, like the first 100 days of Trump.
Well, I mean, look, the fascist light aspects of this presidency are hard to ignore. Scooping up a 4-year-old dying kid, U.S. citizen, depriving him of his meds, cancer patient, and deporting him to Honduras is pretty out there. We're going to see more of it. You can see the way this is going. The next step is going to be a U.S. full-blown, like you and me, born in the USA, American citizen who's going to be deported, and they're going to be like, and that's going to happen. I mean, we can see that now, and the courts seem unable to deal with it. One aspect that I haven't seen a lot of attention to, and I think this is really important, is that this president is he's not interested in even trying to get legislation through Congress. I mean, when you do everything through executive order, and remember, Republicans used to criticize Obama for all of his executive orders, but which were a tiny fraction of, I mean, this is a classic example of, if I could go back and talk to Obama, I'd be like, don't do this. The Republicans will use this as an excuse to do it themselves. It'll get worse and worse. It's, you're setting a precedent. But anyway, the point is, when you decide to do everything by fiat, you're not running a democracy anymore. You're running a monarchy. Right. The part of the reason that all things being equal, if you can do an executive order, but you could, with a lot more work, get the same thing through Congress, you should do the more work thing, because you have buy-in from the representatives of the American people, and so it's stickier. If you do everything by executive order, the next Democrat comes in and signs a bunch of executive orders and throws them all out, right? And then we just go back and forth. There's nothing. So bypassing Congress like this, and Republicans in Congress allowing themselves to be bypassed, they're making themselves as irrelevant as the Reichstag made itself in 1934 when it passed the Enabling Act that basically rubber stamped everything that Adolf Hitler presented as law. That's what this effectively is. Of course, obviously, it's a lighter version of it, but still, it's not good governance. And there's many of these things that he could have gotten through Congress. Now, he needs to peel away like 3-4 Democratic votes. He could. Something just got through Congress, a bill about revenge porn. It passed almost unanimously, except for 2 people. Congress can still do things.
Yeah. Who the hell are those 2 people?
Well, one of them was, I think, Josh Hawley, and he had concerns, I think, who was it? No, it wasn't Josh Hawley, because he's gone. It was someone else. But it was basically someone who thought that this bill could be abused, that like what's considered revenge porn could be, I didn't do a deep dive, could be like defined excessively to apply to things that it shouldn't apply to.
Yeah. Well, no, I agree with you. I've never seen this before. Like, usually presidents take a lot of work to push and push and push to get the votes in order to pass something. I mean,
he's lazy. I wrote a little biography of Donald Trump years ago. And one of the things when I read about his classmates at University of Pennsylvania. They said, when he was a business major, they were like, Donald was smart. He was just lazy. He didn't like to do the work. He was always looking for the quick workaround. And I get that. I feel like he just likes to, it's like, well, why deal with Congress if I can just sign this? And it's like, well,
Exactly.
because I don't think he understands the broader historical implications of what he's doing and how he's doing it. How you do something is very important historically.
Yeah. And the consequences. Like you said, it's a slippery slope. The next guy who comes in, they do the same. Ted, man, I always appreciate these conversations. I didn't mean to get into the conversation to spend that much time on the back and forth on the Russia thing. I'm intrigued by your point of view, because usually people come on our hard asses about it, kind of like me, where it's like, you got to take it all. You got to take it all. How does this war end? Type of stuff.
I'm sympathetic to that. I think that I think that Zelensky, it was a disaster for the people of Ukraine. I think he and Biden and the Biden administration, they fucked up royally and they did provoke Russia. It's kind of like there's like what you deserve, the Ukrainians deserve nothing, right?
Yeah.
But the point is, then there's reality.
Yeah.
And if you want to, sometimes compromise is a bitch,
But it's reality, and just kind of is. Ted Rall, political cartoonist, syndicated columnist, co-host of TMI, Too Much Information, with Manila Chan, the beautiful, the lovely, the awesome Manila Chan. 10 a.m. on YouTube. You can check them out. Definitely check them out. They'll be on today. These guys are on all week. Fantastic, Ted. Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Have a good one.
You too. Bye-bye. All right. I would like to bring on my guests. I always enjoy these conversations. KJ No. He's a political analyst, writer, specializing in geopolitics. He's contributed to the book, It's also on Imminent, the China Report. I don't remember the network.
Jamal, your mic is sounding not great. Your audio is not sounding great. But yes, that's me, KJ No. And
my audio is muffled?
Yes, you're a little muffled. You're better now. Yes. And I'm the host of the China Report on the Breakthrough News Network.
Thank you. The Breakthrough News Report, China Report. Okay, I sound better. Everybody knew. Okay. It just started okay, and there's audio good. Okay. I have no idea what just happened with that. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. KJ, welcome to the show, man. I always appreciate these conversations. My audience always appreciate these conversations. They said Jamal is a dolphin. And they say he's underwater. He sounds better now. China put out a video, very defiant video, actually. And the video right here, I'm going to play it. I'm going to get your take on this, because there are two things. One, it seemed that China relaxed sanctions once, I forget exactly what it was. And the catch in the American media was, is China softening on this notion of defiance to Trump? There was another article that was pointing out that manufacturing in China was taking a dip, which is expected. It's a trade war, right? But this is the video that they put out, which, this kind of preserves this notion of where they stand on this issue.
And fiercer storm. Have you heard of the eye of the storm? It appears calm for a moment, but is actually a deadly trap. The calm before an even fiercer storm. The U.S. has stirred up a global tariff storm and deliberately targeted China, playing a 90-day pause game with other nations, forcing them to limit trade with China. This is just like the deadly trap of the eye of the storm. Bowing to a bully is like drinking poison to quench thirst. It only deepens the crisis. The U.S. once accused Japan of dumping semiconductors and crushed companies like Toshiba. Later, it forced Japan to sign the Plaza Accord, pushing the economy into decades of anemic growth.
I'm not going to play all of that, but I think you get the hint. Playing along is effectively drinking poison. It's not going to quench your thirst. You're going to die from it. And of course, this pitch is to other countries saying, hey, we need to work together, not function as individuals and immediately kowtow to the U.S. that effectively is blackmailing the world. Now, from my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, China has been making inroads with other countries. Xi Jinping has been going to Southeast Asian countries. They've been united on this, Vietnam, Thailand. He has been even making inroads into Europe, trying to get Europe to work with China. If I'm not mistaken, there's a delegation that is supposed to be going to China in May. And so he has been making inroads to these other countries. This pitch on some level has been working. And Trump's pitch of, hey, work with us in order to go after China seems to have completely just fallen flat and failed. Give me your take on this. I mean, are they still taking the hard stance in the way that they did early on in this tariff war? Or are they softening on some as a way of offering this kind of fig leaf of, okay, we can soften on this if you soften on this, basically trying to find some way back. What's going on? Explain what is happening in this trade war.
I think the Chinese have always wanted a modus vivendi. They do not want to get into a tariff war, a trade war, any kind of war with the United States. And at the end of the day, they're pragmatists. So I think they're looking at the situation and seeing if they can throw out a few token gestures, see if that will make the U.S. Come down from, its position. Certainly, the U.S. is already, let's put it bluntly, it's capitulated. It's taken back its moves multiple times, right? First, it imposed the tariffs, then it stayed the tariffs, except for China, and then it decided that it was not going to tariff electronics, which makes no sense unless you don't want to reshore the electronics industry, which you think you might if you were thinking of actually having a viable industrial policy. And then now now it seems that they're going to remove some of the tariffs on automobiles and auto parts, and they're not going to invoke multiple tariffs, because what happens is that components go back and forth over the border, and if you keep levying those tariffs, those are going to pile up very rapidly. As I said, an American car made 100% in the United States has about 12,000 parts from China. Okay, so it's not going to work, and often parts are shipped back and forth along the manufacturing process. For example, between Mexico and the U.S., between Canada and the U.S. So they've lifted some of those tariffs, or they seem to be in the process of lifting them. And so I think the U.S. is climbing down from its extreme position. We certainly know that that position was not sustainable. Essentially, all the markets were tanking. People were shorting the dollar, So that's a situation in which even Trump and his plutocrats around him said, you have to stop doing this. You're killing us, right? So in that context, I think that the Chinese are pragmatists. I think they're signaling that they're willing to negotiate, but they still want Trump to drop his tariffs. That's their bottom line. They're saying to Trump, we're not going to come and negotiate. We're not like the, 200 countries. There aren't 200 countries in the world, but we're not like those 200 countries that are already signing deals with you, in what is it? In days. Your average trade deal takes, 18 months to negotiate, but somehow they're going to compress, like 2 deals, 3 deals a day. Nonsense. But anyway, I think that the Chinese are both sitting back. They're making some small gestures to see if, Trump administration will respond. Some of their own reduction in tariffs is for their advantage, because there are certain things that they want to import without, paying through the nose for it. And then I think they're also going to stand their ground, that they want Trump to come down. They do not want to feed the bully, because that gets you nowhere. You feed the bully your lunch money once, you've just given up your lunch money in perpetuity, right? You cannot do that. And so I think they're standing strong. If you look at the other messages that are coming out of, top officials, they're saying that we are ready to go to the mat. We can go to the mat, and we're happy to do so. But just remember, you are going to be in a world of pain, and our capacity to, manage pain, our pain threshold is higher than yours.
I was speaking to Carl Jha, and he pointed out, he said China had been preparing for this going back since the first Trump administration. Like that basically they understood that when Trump came in, that he was going to do something like this because he did something like this the first time around. And they had been effectively preparing measures, strategy about what are we going to do when he comes back in and he implements a similar policy, which is the reason why you got this kind of steady no beef, or we're not taking your pigs. We're not, we're moving grain to somewhere else. We're not taking your airplane parts. We're not, that's what it was, Boeing. They accepted the Boeing jets. That was the thing that they effectively allowed. Effectively saying, okay, this is hurting our industry. We're going to accept this because, we'll accept this. It's practical for us to do this, but we're still in this trade war, right? Like, is that the way they looked at it? That we knew? I mean, because I could see, the thing is, the consideration is that China's long thinking, that they think through this stuff, not necessarily in this kind of fly by the seat way that Donald Trump is effectively doing it. That when he came in, they thought, we have a strategy, we have a plan, and we're going to implement that plan. We're not going to take this line down. We're going to go with the plan in the way we understand it moving forward. And that is effectively what they're doing. They're implementing strategy that they planned years ago.
Absolutely. I mean, the Chinese are big planners, as you point out. They're long-term thinkers. It is a government that believes in planning. It's a dirigist, market socialist economy. So they plan their work and then they work their plan. And certainly they've been preparing since the last Trump administration. Trump sent all the messages that they needed to know. They're not going to ignore those messages. They know what Trump is saying, and they have been preparing since 2016, but actually since 2011, since Obama declared the pivot to Asia and the TPP and air-sea battle, which is why they started building out the Belt and Road to all the countries of the global South, in particular the Asian continent. And really, I would argue that they've been planning since 1949, because the US has wanted to roll back China since 1949. And I believe that plan has never changed. It simply morphed into different strategies, different tactics. But I think the Chinese are aware of that. And certainly, the taking them into the WTO and hoping that, they would collapse because capitalism, that didn't work. Tiananmen, which was a color revolution attempt, didn't work. Air-sea battle and the strangulation approach, they did a counter strategy, which was the Belt and Road. And then Trump's, two-stage tariffs. The first stage of tariffs during his first administration, they kind of out-negotiated him, and they never got to part two of the trade tariff, the first Trump trade tariff war, which was they were supposed to dismantle their economic system and sell off their state-owned enterprises. The Chinese didn't even let them go there, but they knew what was coming down the pike, and they were preparing for it. So yeah, Carla is absolutely right.
What do you think Trump wants? Like, there was Vincent, the Treasury Secretary. I played the farcical speech that he made, saying, "We want to help China. We're just love and light. We just believe in helping people, and we just want to help them to modulate their economy and blah 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 blah." With a person like that, how do you negotiate with that guy? He has a very specific objective that he wants to accomplish, and that is to the detriment of China. And they know it's to the detriment of China. So how do you, I guess what I'm asking is, what do you think they want in any kind of negotiation? And what would China want in any kind of negotiation with the United States, if indeed it even negotiates with the US? I mean, I don't know if Trump can eat crow enough to phone Xi Jinping, and he's going to wait for a phone call that is never going to come from Xi Jinping. Both sides have dug in. But assume for the moment that both sides do talk. What do you think?
Well, I mean, according to President Trump, he's already talking to President Xi, right? I mean, we don't know if it's his imaginary friend Xi Jinping, but he claims that he's already in dialogue, and the Chinese have come out, and they never do this, but they have come out. The foreign ministry has come out, in full frontal, saying, no, we have not talked to that guy. So that's about as blunt as you can get it, right? So in some sense, Trump, I think, is already eating crow. I mean, he's certainly backpedaling. He's certainly taking back all of his moves. And I believe that eventually, if he wants, I think the Chinese will offer him some kind of face-saving way to re-engage, hopefully, because otherwise, the alternative is actually global catastrophe, certainly global recession, and then certainly global, escalation to world war. I think that's a real possibility. What does Trump want? I think at the end of the day, he wants people to kiss his ass, and he wants to be considered the greatest, right? I think that's what it boils down to. What does Besant want? What does Hegseth want? What do Lutnick, what do the other people want? It's a variety of agendas, and they have overlapping and separate agendas. Navarro's agenda is not quite the same thing as Besant, etc. Navarro wants, sincerely, I believe, in his misguided way, I believe that he sincerely wants to reshore industry to the United States. I've said before that is not going to happen. Mm-hmm. It's not going to happen for a variety of reasons, but essentially a monopolized capitalist corporations do not want to do industrial manufacturing. They would much rather financialize and get cheap rents based on their monopoly power, on their power to gouge the working class, rather than do the hard work, which will actually take decades of building up industries, making risky investments, training people, and this training will take decades too, and then seeing if they can rebuild industrial capacity. That is not going to happen. And so when Trump says China stole our jobs, absurdity. First there's a kind of socialist thinking, which is the notion that, that people under capitalism, people are not entitled to jobs. Under socialism, under certain systems, people are given jobs, right? Everybody has the right to work. Everybody has the right to livelihood. In the US system, a job is not a guarantee, and it's not a possession that you can hold, right? And so when they say they stole our jobs, how did they steal them? It's absurd. It's the US ruling imperial plutocratic class went abroad for two reasons. One is they wanted the kind of windfall profits from exploiting cheap labor. And secondly, they wanted to discipline labor inside the United States. When unions were making too many demands, they were saying, no, you don't get to ask anything of us. We're going to take our ball and play in another court. And it was a very deliberate attempt to discipline labor, right? So I think that horse has left the band. So Peter Navarro is misguided. There is not going to be significant reshoring. And even if it is, it's going to largely involve automation, which is not going to create massive amounts of industrial manufacturing jobs. And then the other piece is people need to understand this. Manufacturing is really, really hard. And there is no such thing as an easy job. Anybody who's been in the workplace knows that there's no such thing as an easy job. But manufacturing is certainly not easy, and it requires tremendous skill and experience and gumption and hard work and discipline. All of these things that I think that the U.S. Has to train people back up into doing. The other thing is, and this relates to deindustrialization, it's really important for people to understand this, is that the U.S. has not only had a 50-year process of deindustrialization, it's had a 50-year process of de-skilling. That is, it's made jobs fungible. That is, you want to make jobs as unskilled as possible, so that you can exchange workers in this rapid fashion. So for example, if you're a short order cook is actually a pretty skilled job. I mean, anybody can fry an egg, but to fry 50 eggs at the same time with perfect timing while doing the toast and the coffee and everything else and the salad, everything else at the same time, that is actually, I mean, you're like an orchestral conductor. It is actually a skilled job. If you take a job like that and you break it down into its component parts, you essentially, what you do is you de-skill it. So this is why somebody can walk into McDonald's and then, which isn't to say that McDonald's work is easy, but you can go in and you can start working that very day. It doesn't take you months and years to get to a high level of skill. And certainly the moment you walk out, you will be replaced immediately. And so this process of de-skilling and of making workers fungible, interchangeable, has been happening for decades now. And that is not, and that process has to be reversed. And there's no inclination to do that. And then last but not least, you know, the coming always back to the training piece, the youth in the United States are not being given the skills to succeed. You know, basic literacy skills are lacking. You know, your average person reads at a 6th grade level. And just one example in California, you know, there are, you know, thousands of linemen, electrical linemen who are going to retire, and nobody can replace them because there are not enough trained youth in the trades who can do that work. And so the electricity grid is going to collapse even further. And you need electricity for industrialization. So there's so many levels of like poor policy that have accrued over the decades that have led us to this point that it is not going to be easy to reindustrialize, even if they were genuine about that.
And by the way, you know, destroying the Department of Education is not a beneficial thing. The school loan policy, the notion that you don't have free college or free schools where people can go and do whatever like, meaning it's one thing if you're unlocking the potential of a public. Say, hey, I don't care if you're dirt poor. I don't care if you're homeless. You can go to college. You can go to school. You may have duds, but you're also going to have people who under normal circumstances wouldn't have went into school to learn to be a doctor, to learn to be a nurse, to learn to be a tradesman, to learn to be a linesman. Those are things that you want people to do. And instead, what we decide, hey, we can maximize our profit on the backs of an 18-year-old. Okay, that creates a disincentive for those kids to go and get that education. Trump is not doing anything about that. Like, it's almost magical thinking that you're going to somehow build up industry in the US without training people to do those industries and without creating a foundation in regards to like a governmental foundation to put people in a prime position to be able to do those jobs. They're not doing that. That's not part of the math. That's not part of the dynamic. It's just, if we build it, they would come. And what his mind is, if we increase prices, then we can support various industries that we couldn't support in the US under normal circumstances. But now if people have to pay more for that t-shirt, pay more for that item, that product, then now you can have it made in the USA. I think it's a faulty premise. I think that stuff takes years, if not decades. Trump is going to be dead before seeing any results of it, if any results at all come about. I agree with you. I agree with you wholeheartedly.
You're absolutely right, Jamal. And, you know, just coming back to this notion of education, I grew up in South Korea, which was undergoing rapid development and industrialization. So just to kind of drive home this idea about education, starting the age of 12, everybody in my school, and we're just a regular, you know, middle school, but everybody in my school was taught about, you know, the metallurgy, you know, ferrous metallurgy. So we learned about quenching and annealing and the carbon content of different types of steel. And then we also learned the 20 different types of shipping insurance. You know, this is starting at the age of 12 or 13.
Wait, did you say shipping insurance?
Yeah, the different types of shipping insurance, you know, who pays for the insurance, where does it start from, etc. When you're doing trade. All of these things are stuff that you have to know, or eventually, people have to become expert in this. So we learned all of these things because the country was industrializing, and it was expected that many of us would start to go into these trades, and that you would need a trained, workforce to deal with it. And this is what you have to do. You actually have to start it pretty young. You have to start, youth with, math and all those basic skills. And then you also have to teach them the specific skills related to various industrial sectors. Let me give you another example. In China, there are entire high schools that are dedicated to training youth, that's like 6-year-olds, 15 and 16-year-olds, how to work on EVs, right? These are entire, starting the age of 15, they learn how to fix EVs. We don't have that. I'm sure we have like short-term programs where you can pay through the nose to, to learn some of the basics, but you don't have, systematic, entire programs set up by, local departments of education to do that. You just don't have that kind of, forethought or, policy level programming. And so these are things that we need to do if we were serious about that. You don't see any of that. So that lets us know that the project of these tariffs isn't really about industrialization, or certainly it's not serious about industrialization. It's really about, finding a pretext to give tax cuts, even more tax cuts to the plutocrats, and for, bashing the rest of the world. And possibly, as Brian Berletic says, is, building out a kind of isolationist structure and a decoupling that prepares for wars. And then, last piece, as you said, we've said this before, but, when you take an 18-year-old and you make them take out, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars in loans, the only thing, you've done two things. One is you've saddled them with debt for the rest of their lives, and they can never discharge those loans. Before, you used to be able to declare bankruptcy. You can no longer do that regarding student loans. So, you can expect to be paying those loans into your retirement and beyond. And at the same time, it makes, so that's the extractive part of financialized capital that is always trying to gain rents from the working class. And the second piece is you've disciplined them and you've made sure that they don't get any ideas, that they're not going to be, free thinkers or, creative or etc. You've set them up essentially to be exploited and extracted, and they won't challenge the system because they're already too burdened with debt. And then the last thing that you're doing there is you are creating an entire ecosystem where everything is fed for profit, that you're not really, education in its best sense is the cultivation of the best capacities of each individual so that a society can flourish, that you train, teach, develop each individual to reach their highest potential. And by saddling them with debt right from the get-go, you send the message that you are just a worker drone, and you are going to, be under the boot heel of the plutocratic class the rest of your life, and that you're going to be essentially, you think of all these private schools that go into working class neighborhoods and they make big promises to these kids. Kids are 18, 17, they know nothing about it. They sign on the dotted line. Next thing you know, they're in the hawk for tens of thousands of dollars at schools that are essentially mills for extracting money from them, that they do nothing for, these working class students. They don't even train them or teach them anything. They just know that they have a captive audience that they've sold a bill of goods to, and they keep on, extracting money. And then when the kids can't pay, they put the money into collections, and next thing you know, collections is coming after these kids. So it's such a vicious, pernicious, ugly system, and it happens all the time from all directions.
At 17, you're not even allowed to drink alcohol. And yet you can sign on the dotted line for a loan that you're going to have for the next 60 years. It's outrageous. It's just outrageous. Like, and my boss used to talk about how in other countries, they want kids to go to school. And so they don't charge them for it. And the US is competing with other countries where kids can just go to school when they want to. And those kids would go to school and they would come here and they would get all of these really good jobs. Like, meaning his point was, you guys are screwing yourselves in regards to the world economy and the world market by putting this on the backs of children in this way. You're damaging your workforce, your kids. And, you know, I remember ECPI, like some of these schools that you're talking about, those mills, you can't even transfer credits to accredited schools. So effectively, you have a degree that you can't really use for anything short of a specific task that you may or may not get. No, I agree with you. ECPI was one of those schools. I remember being in class, we were doing software engineering, and let's say 90% of the class couldn't do it, and they still got an A. It was that, right?
Yeah.
And I remember my teacher took me aside. He says, okay, you seem to be really proficient at this. I'm going to give you a separate project. Okay, he had to do that because I could do it, right? And many of the other people couldn't code themselves out of a paper bag. And yet they would still get B's and A's. It was almost like it was just given, as opposed to, okay, they're not going to use it anyway. They have other jobs. This is a throwaway degree. No, you're absolutely right. One last question before I let you go. Where do you fall on the Brian Berletic thing? Because there's two streams of thoughts. One is, okay, Trump really does believe that manufacturing can come back to the United States by using tariffs. He read a book on William McKinley, and he heard about tariffs. And he believes this country ran on tariffs at one point, and we can do it again. We can, you know, anybody who's making under $200,000, the tariffs can just pay their taxes. Now, everybody else looks at this, okay, this guy's incompetent, right? But he may believe that. The people around him may have a different idea. As you pointed out, all of them may have different ideas in regards to what they want to do and what they want to accomplish. And whether they fully explain those ideas to Trump is secondary to the point. I don't know if George Bush knew about Project for a New American Century as he was going about doing Project for a New American Century. I don't know if Donald Trump entirely knows about Pathway to Persia as he goes about seemingly following a very similar playbook to Pathway to Persia. He may be sending Witkoff over there to actually get a deal, not wanting a war, while simultaneously people around him pushing him to do things that are red lines in order to get their playbook through. So what he knows and what he wants may be secondary to let's say how he's being maneuvered, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I mean, first, the thing is, whatever it is the administration is doing, it is very confused, and they're sending multiple mixed messages. We do know that there is a significant batch of neocons inside the administration. Is that Trump's agenda? Were they, recommended to him? Were they forced upon him? How successful are they? All of these things will remain to be seen. What we do know is that, I don't want to sound trite, but there is this thing that we call the deep state, right? It's the permanent national security state. And John Kiriakou, who was at the CIA, he said they would refer to the president as the temps, right? These are temporary people. We are the people who have the real power. We have the enduring institutional capacity, and we do what we want. And the temps, they come and go. So I think there is some real momentum. As I've pointed out many times before, there is real momentum to war. Bessent, this is his third try at taking down China. He tried twice before, once with Soros, once with his own hedge fund. And this time, he's saying that, out of the goodness of our hearts, we want China to change. Well, I mean, if you want China to change, there's a deep contradiction there, because you want to help China because it needs change, because it's not doing so well. At the same time, you want it to change because it's doing too well, right? So there's a deep contradiction. Essentially, Bessent wants to take down China. He wants to destroy China. And his primary method is through financial means, as he tried before during the Asian crisis, where they shorted the Hong Kong dollar, right? You know how shorting works. Essentially, when you're in business, the rule is to buy low and sell high, correct? Okay. When you're shorting something, you're kind of inverting the timeline, or you're moving against, the stream of time. And what you do is you buy high. So a traditional business, you buy low and sell high, right? And when you're shorting, what you do is you revert that time sequence. So you sell high and you buy low. Okay. How do you do that? You do that by borrowing money. So I asked Jamal, can I borrow $100 from you? I take your $100, I sell it on the market, and I get 700 yuan. And then the dollar drops, and then I take the 700 yuan that I have and I buy dollars again, but this time the dollars are cheaper. And so then I return your money to you. I can even pay you interest, and I've still made out more money than through this shorting process. Now, the thing that happens when you have a trader like Besant is not simply are they shorting, but the mere fact that they're buying and selling forces the market to go down. And this is what Besant tried to do during the Asian IMF crisis. He essentially tried to destroy the Chinese economy, and he was successful in destroying several Asian economies, including Korea, Thailand, Malaysia, etc. So this can be very, very powerful. And they made $6-8 billion from this, run on currencies in Asia. Although it cost those countries, it cost them hundreds of billions of dollars. But these are ruthless people. I mean, they see. Soros' agenda is to destroy China. I mean, he sees China as the primary threat to his notion of whatever is a good world. And Besant was his field marshal. He was his campaign manager in attempting to attack China. And so he tried it under Soros, and then he tried it with himself. And this is his third time. And now he has tariffs to do that. So he's waging financial war. He's the general of financial war. Navarro wants to reshore things. Hegseth wants, I believe, to escalate into military confrontation. How well are they coordinating with each other? How well is this thought out? I'm not so sure about this, because if they were thinking things out, they would think about sequencing and critical paths, and they haven't done any of that. Essentially, they're all kind of, just throwing something at the wall and seeing if they can, make it happen. But I believe at the end of the day that regardless of what Trump wants or doesn't want, I think that the escalation against China is real and very, very concrete. It's very, very tangible. You can see what's happening in Asia with all the escalating military exercises, the installation of very, very threatening weapon systems. For example, the Typhoon system in the Philippines, the counterforce, missiles in the Okinawan area, Okinawan archipelago, etc. And so these escalations are very, very real and concrete. And this is why China is sending a very, very strong message, not simply that it is ready for financial war, economic war, trade war, but that it is also ready to go to the mat if it turns kinetic. And the horrifying thing is that if it goes kinetic, the US cannot win a war against China. It's simply not possible. They were unable to win a war against China when they confronted it directly in 1950, when China was one of the poorest countries on the planet. And the troops that were fighting the US, were wearing sneakers in the snow. This was how poor China was. Now, China is, 1,000 times more powerful than them. And the US is not stupid. They understand that that is the case. But what they are banking on, as far as I can tell from policy papers that are being circulated, is they plan to go nuclear. And this is why they're talking about having this seamless continuity between conventional and tactical nuclear weapons. And if it goes tac nuke, it will also go strategic nuclear. And this is where I, disagree, for example, with Carl Za, seems to think that the US doesn't have capacity to wage war. Certainly it doesn't have the real industrial capacity. China controls the rare earth metals, 900 pounds of rare earth metals go into every F-35. If they can't get those rare earth metals from China, they can't build those weapons. The same thing with Boeing parts, etc. But what they are counting on is what is called, counterforce strike, rapid. Essentially, it's a nuclear sucker punch. Rapid.
It's a decapitation strike with nuclear weapons.
Exactly. And China is not going to put up with that. And so this is the real danger. So I think that we are in a world which is very, very dangerous. And we have to see the trade war as potentially this pre-kinetic dimension of a oncoming kinetic war, that the train is coming at us, which is why we have to work, I believe, to de-escalate the trade war and also to, do everything we can to work for peace.
Carl, what you say, Carl Shaw? You think he's, because Carl's thick is they don't have the balls to do it. And I think, I don't know, and these, it's
the grizzly bear fallacy, right? I said that 6% of U.S. adults, sentient U.S. adults, believe that they can fight a grizzly bear and defeat it with their bare hands, right? I believe that there are people in the ruling imperial class, and certainly the corporate techno-fascist feudal class, who believe that they have the technical wherewithal to defeat China. These are people like Paul Malaki at Anduril, the Palantir guys who are facilitating the genocide in Gaza. They believe that with some good coding and some AI and some bots and some interconnected drones, that they can destroy China. So these people are the tech equivalent of the 6% that believe that they can fight a grizzly with their bare hands, except they're going to fight it with lines of code.
KJ, always appreciate you, man. And the audience loves you. Thank you. KJ No, he's a journalist, political analyst, writer, teacher, specializing in the geopolitics of the Asia-Pacific region. He's a contributor to the book Capitalism on a Ventilator, once censored by Amazon. It is now available at iacenter.org. You can also catch him on, what do people find you?
The China Report on YouTube, on the Breakthrough News Network. And I just put out an interview with Dr. Victor Gao, who is very, very experienced hand on Chinese and U.S. politics.
Oh, very cool. Where can they find it? Well, they can find it on the thing, but they can find it now.
They can find it now. It just came out yesterday on the China Report.
Oh, perfect timing. Perfect timing. KJ, man, thank you for this. By the way, is the China Report live, or is it putting out videos?
We're putting out videos. We actually pre-record, and then it is put out in a live format so people can watch it and comment.
Very cool. You have a fantastic day, KJ. Thank you for this. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
Absolutely. All right. I learn something every time KJ comes on. I love his visits. I try to get him on once a week, typically Wednesdays. That's the way it's just kind of been breaking out. So shout out to KJ. Deeply appreciate him joining us. And like I said, great analysis, great takes. Apparently somebody said I saw it yesterday. Good. Good. I at the very least want the advertisement to give something back to him. Let's go to our chat. We have a few chats. So Girl Cousin, new member. Shout out to Girl Cousin. I can't see them in there, but okay. It looks like they were putting up the heart sign. Shout out to you, Girl Cousin. Thank you. I appreciate it. Welcome to the family. Welcome to the family. Gifted 5 Jamal Thomas memberships. Jay, I honestly still don't know what that means when it says that. So is it to somebody, or is it that the person buys 5 memberships? I still don't understand what that means. But Jay, whatever it means, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. Lav 66, Ted Rall is so naive on Ukraine. He does have he's a more moderated view on it. He's a more moderated view. I'm not going to say naive. I'm going to say more moderated. Because what he's saying is not unrealistic. I mean, even Arno pointed out, Putin may accept something where he linguistically makes an argument for the regions or the area where it's stopped at, that this is these regions. So even he pointed out that Putin may do that. Even Mark points out that Putin has a tendency to be more diplomatic than they would want him to be. Who knows? I think it's hard to do that, especially when you put them in your constitution. Like the moment that you put it into law and you said, this is now law, that is kind of difficult to pull off. But who knows? I mean, from the Russian point of view, Europe is falling apart. The sanctions, the 20,000, Russia is what, 4% or something like that, where their economy is moving at a particular clip, where Europe's economy is going in the toilet. From their point of view, if we just keep going, Europe will collapse. The Ukrainian military will collapse. We get the unconditional surrender that we want. At least that's the way I look at it. You want a definitive win. They have killed hundreds of thousands of your people. That's a big fucking deal. And a war that you didn't want, nor did you ask for, that they effectively provoked. So it's just a different point of view. You could very well say, we're sick of this war, we want to bring it to an end, and we want to bring it to an end with, let's say, the benefits that come along with bringing it to an end. By the same token, what Trump is offering is ridiculous. Just utterly ridiculous. If they bend on it, maybe, but I don't know. Time will tell. Extra Medium, is that what that name is? Extra Medium. Thank you, Extra Medium. Thank you. Awesome bros. I appreciate it, man. Thank you. I try. I'm doing my damnedest. I am doing my damnedest. Guys, good show today. Full show today. Andre wasn't able to make it this morning. I was going to have a conversation. Complex. It's random, but I've never won a membership. What do you mean won a membership? People going to win memberships? He's allowed his opinion. Yes, he's Neil Kurtz. He's allowed his opinion. I mean, we don't have echo chamber here. Less divergent, you mean? I don't know what, okay, you guys are having your own personal conversation. Fei Lu, they're getting into Adrian Dittman. Apparently they're having a fight. Love KJ, one of my favorites. KJ is also one of my favorites. He's fantastic. His analysis is great. General Troy, kudos, Jamal. Thank you, General Troy. Cypher Agent, one of my favorite guests. Everybody loves KJ, apparently. He is a great guest. Let's see who's else. Still near Curtis, Peasants, Kuplex. Thanks, KJ. They love KJ. He's a good guest. He knows his stuff. I see Charles G is here. What is this one? Arcane Eclectic. Great name. Andrea Dittman, Fei Lu. Guys, thank all of you. Soros says the UFO church. Does he? Does he? Does he? Is that true? Is that true? I'm going to get sued by Soros saying, God damn it, I don't have a UFO church. All right. I'm going to end it. Guys, good show. Really good show. We've had a good number of people here the entire time. I think we hit 500 and we stayed at 500 the entire time. I think we even bumped up above 500 with KJ. I think we had like 550. So not bad. Show is growing. I want to keep this show ticking along. As Mark Tackman said, till the next episode. Thank you, Mark Tackman. RJ Raymond, shout out to you. Guys, have a fantastic day. I'm going to cut these up. I don't think I have anything else to say. It's been 3 hours. My mouth is parched. You guys have a fantastic day. I will see you all tomorrow. I want to thank all of you for joining me today. Best damn morning show, news, politics, as I like to call it. Ted Rall and Manila Chan, they're on TTMI on YouTube, so you can definitely check them out. Definitely check out KJ's show. China Report, Breakthrough News. I need to write that down and put that in his bio as opposed to just keep asking him. I ask him because sometimes people have new stuff and the bio is just what it is. And if you just read what's in the bio, you may miss the fact they have new stuff. I would have never known he had the China Report if I would have never asked. So I'm going to say like, share. No, Jamal, we're not arguing this time. Adrian did it. Fair enough, Adrian. Fair enough. All right, guys. You have a fantastic day. I will see y'all tomorrow. Be safe. Be kind to your neighbors. Don't hurt nobody. And have a fantastic day. Signing off.